Coffee is great, and it's close to my apartment, right on my way to work. About a year before, I found out that Amy, my ex-wife, was more interested in our neighbor than in our marriage. She seemed to want both things. She got really upset when I confronted her and decided to leave. We were divorced about 4 months later, despite her saying things like, "It didn't mean anything," and "I still love you." Once I got over the anger of being betrayed by someone I cared for and started dating again, I realized I didn't miss her much. But I had grown used to having someone prepare a nice breakfast for me, so the Acropolis became my go-to spot every morning before work. I enjoyed my regular breakfast and coffee, read the sports and opinion pages of the newspaper, and chatted a little with Iris and Debbie, 2 waitresses. They were both friendly and married, and we all enjoyed the light-hearted banter, knowing it was just fun. One morning, while I was thinking about the struggles of the Reds, the baseball team I had followed since childhood, I overheard a serious conversation from a booth behind me. One woman sounded very upset, and her friend was trying to comfort her. "You just don't understand, Katie." Her voice was shaky. "It feels like everyone only sees me in a bad way. I get approached so often, yet I'm so lonely. Come on, Tommy, it's not that bad. You've had more boyfriends than my other friends. Remember that guy, Scott? He was really cute and seemed to like you a lot." "That guy was trouble. He acted kind and caring until we got intimate. After that, he was only interested in one thing. Did he want to go out or do something fun? No, he just wanted to rush things," Tommy continued, sounding frustrated. He would say things that made me uncomfortable rather than nice compliments about who I am. Katie replied softly, "Oh, Tommy, I had no idea it felt this way." And then one time he brought 2 friends along. He was coming over for a nice dinner at my apartment, and we planned to go see a movie afterward because I really wanted to. Then, he walked in with 2 of his friends and suggested we all hang out in my room. I told Jim and Andy how great you are and they would really like to spend time with you too. Her friend sat quietly for a moment, probably surprised. I know I was. Then she said softly, "Oh, Tommy, that's terrible. What did you do?" I told them to leave my apartment right away, and then I lay down and cried for 2 hours. I also ignored Scott's calls for the next 2 weeks. That guy was so disrespectful. She shed a few tears before continuing. This has been my experience ever since high school. Guys find me attractive, but all they care about is being physical. No one ever takes the time to treat me like a real person. You're fortunate to have Eric. He cares about you and finds you attractive. She laughed lightly. Even after 6 years, I really envy you both. I listened closely to this conversation happening right behind me. All thoughts of baseball were gone. I had never thought that being seen as very attractive could be a problem for a woman. After a little while, I heard Tommy say, "Let me freshen up before we go, okay? I must look a mess." Then she came out of the booth behind me and walked toward the restroom. From the back, she looked nice, but not out of the ordinary. She was of average height with blonde hair that fell just past her shoulders, and she wore a casual summer dress that reached down to her knees. I returned to my reading but looked up again a few minutes later when I heard her come back. It was captivating. I felt a strong attraction that I had never experienced before. Tommy was very pretty, but not perfect. Some of my friends might say she was an 8 or an 8.5, but definitely not a 10. She had a nice figure, but she wasn't a model type. Still, there was something about her that made her the most captivating person I had ever seen. In an instant, my mind wandered to thoughts of being close to her in ways that I felt embarrassed about. I quickly reminded myself not to think that way. I looked back down at my newspaper, hoping she wouldn't see how I felt. I didn't look up again until she passed by. A little while later, she and her friend paid their bill and left the diner. I thought about Tommy all the way to work and several times during the day, reflecting on how I reacted to seeing her. I felt a bit embarrassed because it was clear that all the men in her life had treated her poorly, and I was worried I might have done the same. I had heard her sadly talk about how much that kind of attention upset her. It left me feeling like most men were not good people, and I wondered if I was one of them. After a couple of weeks, I mostly forgot about Tommy, but I promised myself to be more respectful to the women I met. 4 months later, I had a chance to keep that promise when I met her in person. I was at my desk at work, where I was the main IT support person when Irene Simmons came down the hallway introducing a new employee. She visited each cubicle saying, "Tommy Parker, this is Hank Olson, our marketing guy." And before she got closer, I recognized her as the beautiful blonde from the diner. I had a moment to gather myself. When Irene reached my desk, I stood up and greeted Tommy with a handshake and a friendly smile, making sure to keep my eyes on her face. "Welcome," I said. "Minestra is a great place to work. I hope you enjoy it here." "Thank you," she replied, smiling back at me. She seemed a bit shy. Irene added, "Tommy will be taking over as Ben's assistant in the sales division." "Oh, you'll like working with Ben," I said. "He's a wonderful guy. Just be glad you won't be in Irene's office. She can be tough. I have some interesting stories." Irene laughed and gave my shoulder a playful nudge. I glanced at Tommy and was relieved to see she recognized I was joking. I made a quick comment about being available if she needed IT help, and then I said goodbye and turned back to my desk. I was doing my best to seem friendly and approachable. To my delight, I heard Irene tell Tommy as they walked away, "Jack is a great guy. He loves to joke around." I sat down and took a deep breath. Seeing Tommy affected me just like the first time. She was incredibly attractive in a way I couldn't fully explain. If she had come back and suggested I leave my job right away, I would have seriously considered it. But I kept remembering the conversation I'd overheard, her sadness at being viewed only as an object, and I was determined to show her I was different. I might remain just a casual friend, but I would try my best to be kind and non-threatening. Ben's office was far from mine, so I didn't see Tommy again that day or the next. I waited until her third day at work, thinking she would feel a bit more at ease by then. Around 11 o'clock, I headed over to Ben's assistant's desk. "Hi, it's Tommy, right?" I said, pretending I wasn't sure about her name. "I'm Jack from IT. How are you finding everything so far?" She smiled back at me, friendly but a little cautious. For a minute or two, we chatted nicely. I then suggested, "There's a nice lunch place called Armando's over on Fletcher Ave, just a few blocks away. Would you like to join us for lunch today?" I noticed her expression change, and before she could respond, I quickly added, "Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to make it sound like I was asking you out." "There's a group of 6 or 7 of us who usually eat there," I explained. "Hank Olson, whom you've met, and 2 women from marketing, along with Irene sometimes and a few others. We'd love for you to join us only if you're free, of course." She seemed to relax, and after thinking for a moment, she replied, "That sounds nice, actually. I don't know this part of downtown very well." "Great," I said. "We usually meet by the elevators around 12:15. See you then?" "Okay," she said, giving me a warm smile. I went back to my office feeling good about our conversation. Tommy joined our lunch group most days, and within a couple of weeks, she fit right in. At first, she was shy and didn't speak much, but she laughed at the jokes among us. As she got more comfortable, she even started to share her own playful comments. There was just one thing that bothered me, though others didn't seem to notice. The men in our group acted a little differently around her. Morty and Ted from accounting couldn't seem to keep their eyes off her. Even Hank Olson, who was happily married, would glance at her when he thought no one was watching. Everyone in our group knew each other well, so there was no obvious flirting. It would have been awkward in that setting. Still, I could sense that the other guys shared the same attraction to Tommy that I had felt when I first saw her. As for me, those feelings were still there, but had changed after I overheard something unsettling that day in the diner. I felt sorry for her, a kind, friendly person who couldn't control how the men reacted to her. She never flirted. Her teasing was light and about work, or small things, like the time Morty wore mismatched socks. She must have known what the men in the group were feeling. I wondered if the women noticed it too. One day, I overheard Irene and Leanne quietly chatting by the water cooler. "I just don't see what's so special about her," Leanne whispered. "She's pretty, I guess, but why do all the guys seem so fascinated by her?" Leanne was 42 and unmarried, and she could be a bit sharp-tongued. Irene replied gently, "I know what you mean, Leanne, but it's not Tommy's fault. She's friendly, but she dresses modestly, and I've never seen her flirt with anyone. Did you notice how she always sits facing the wall so she doesn't have to deal with the attention from the guys?" Leanne nodded reluctantly, and as I walked by, they shifted to a different topic. A few days later, I walked into the men's room to find Morty and Ted washing their hands. It was clear who they were discussing. "I just can't believe how much she captivates me. It feels like I've never seen a woman before," Ted exclaimed. "I know," Morty agreed. "It's almost embarrassing. Have you had any luck?" "Not a chance. She's always kind, but she's turned me down 4 times. No dinner, no movie, no walks after work, nothing. Maybe she likes women." They both laughed, and Morty added, "That would be a shame." "Hey, Jack," he said, turning to me. "What about you? Have you tried asking Tommy out?" "No," I replied casually. "I haven't asked her out yet. She is kind of pretty, I'll admit." "Pretty? She's amazing," Ted exclaimed. "She's the most attractive person I've ever seen. Honestly, I'd do anything for a chance." I laughed and said, "Thanks for that thought, Ted. Maybe you should just ask her out and see what happens." As I left the men's room, they were still discussing her. I wanted to be a nice guy, to show Tommy that a man could be friendly without trying too hard for her attention. But that didn't mean I didn't find her appealing. Over time, my feelings shifted a little. She was still attractive, but after a few weeks I got used to it, and my strong desire didn't overwhelm me as much. I began to think more about what a wonderful person Tommy was. She was thoughtful and kind, and I genuinely enjoyed spending time with her. I pondered whether I would feel the same way if she were less attractive. That question came to my mind often, but I never found an answer. I noticed how caring she was when Irene's mother passed away unexpectedly. She took time off her work to take Irene out for coffee, showing her support. Tommy was patient too, especially with Connie, who often dominated our group lunches with stories about her boyfriend. Connie was seeing a guy who didn't want to settle down, as people often say, and she talked about him a lot. More than once, Ted, Morty, or I almost told her to either break up with him or commit to him. But Tommy would listen and comfort Connie. She somehow made Connie feel better when the rest of us were growing tired of hearing about it. It was nearly 7 months after Connie started working at Minestra before I seriously considered asking Tommy out. I tried really hard to be respectful. I never stared at her during lunch like the other guys did, and I never made any comments that could be seen as flirtatious. At the same time, I would casually mention dates I had been on with different women, just to show that I had a social life, but no one special at the moment. When Morty joked about whether I was dating much, I would say something like, "Ruth, Allison, or Lily are nice, and we enjoy our time together." I didn't want to come off as too reserved, but I did want to seem like a genuine and respectful guy, not just someone looking for attention. I aimed to keep that impression. I looked for a chance to do something nice. Tommy had mentioned that she used to play the violin and still liked music. So I reached out to my friend Nick in Minneapolis, who loves classical music, and asked him for concert suggestions that a former violinist might enjoy. He recommended a concert with a Brahms symphony and the Tchaikovsky violin concerto. He said any violinist would love the concerto, and most classical music fans enjoyed Brahms. That sounded perfect, so I took his advice, got 2 good tickets, and went to talk to Tommy, telling her a little white lie. She greeted me with a friendly smile when I approached her desk and asked me to hold on while she finished her call. Then she said, "Hey Jack, what's up? Do you need to see Ben today?" "No, actually, Tommy, I was hoping you could help me with something." I kept it casual, avoiding any suggestive comments. "I have an aunt in Phoenix who is retired and spends her time online, keeping in touch with family and sending us helpful advice through email, like reminding us to bring an umbrella if it rains." Tommy laughed, and I continued, "For my birthday, wanting to give me an opportunity for some culture, she sent me 2 tickets to the Indianapolis Symphony. The concert is a week from Friday. It was the Brahms Second Symphony, a Mendelssohn piece, and the Tchaikovsky violin concerto. I know you really like classical music, and I was hoping you'd come to the concert with me and help me understand it better. I think I'd enjoy it much more that way." I noticed her eyes narrowing as she thought for a moment. Then she said, "I think I'd like that, Jack. A week from Friday?" She took a small planner out of her purse and checked her schedule. "That should work. Who's playing the concerto?" I took the tickets from my pocket. "A guy named Joshua Bell, he any good?" "Oh my God," she exclaimed. "He's amazing. I heard him play at Carnegie Hall in New York once, and he's really fantastic. she finished, looking a bit shy about her excitement. I had looked up Joshua Bell and found out he was not just a great violinist, but also quite charming. It seemed Tommy knew that, too. We talked for a few more moments, agreeing to meet at the Hilbert Circle Theater, and I returned to my desk. I hadn't asked her to dinner, and I was careful not to mention the word date, or imply it was anything more than just a concert. The concert was wonderful. I knew a bit more about classical music than I let on to Tommy, having grown up with a mother who played piano and took me to many concerts. Tommy was very excited about the performance, especially about Joshua Bell, who played beautifully. She shared a lot about the composers and the music before each piece. What made me happiest was that Tommy seemed relaxed around me. At work, she always wore nice, modest clothes, never anything too revealing. As for me, I kept a friendly attitude. I found her attractive, but I was sure I didn't let it show. After the concert, we had a quick cup of coffee at a cafe nearby, and I walked her to her apartment. I planned to keep things simple with just a handshake, so I was pleasantly surprised when she leaned over, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Thanks, Jack, this was really fun." "I had a great time too, Tommy. Maybe we can do it again sometime. See you tomorrow." With a smile and a wave, I watched her enter her building, feeling happy as I walked home. Thinking it over, I waited 2 full weeks before I mentioned another concert. I wanted her to know I had no expectations, and that I could be patient. I never told anyone in our lunch group or anyone at Minestra that Tommy and I had gone to a concert. I thought she might mention it the next day, saying something like, "That was fun, Jack." But she acted like it never happened with our lunch group. After 2 weeks, I walked over to her desk and said, "Tommy, I really enjoyed the symphony concert. Would you like to go again?" She smiled and said she would, so I took out the symphony calendar I had printed and said, "Well, I have their schedule right here." Tommy laughed. I pulled up a chair and we checked the schedule, deciding on the following week when they were playing Prokofiev and a Beethoven symphony. Our second visit to the orchestra felt just like the first. Tommy talked about the composers and the music. We both enjoyed the concert, and we chatted easily. I learned more about her big sister Alice, who married a guy from Canada and lived in Toronto. I shared some funny stories about my job as a lifeguard at a YMCA while going through college and some of the wild things that happened there. During intermission, something interesting happened. I left Tommy for a few minutes to get us Cokes. When I had them, I looked back and saw a very good-looking guy talking with her. Since we weren't officially dating, I knew I had to act relaxed. As I made my way through the crowd, I saw him being very charming, but I couldn't tell how Tommy felt about him. When I finally got to them, I handed Tommy her drink and said to the guy, "Hi, I'm Jack." He replied, "Hello, I'm Renee," clearly not thrilled I had joined them. There was an awkward pause, and then he continued his story to Tommy, probably trying to impress her. But once he noticed Tommy was with someone, he seemed less engaged. After a few more minutes, he nodded to me and told Tommy sincerely how much he enjoyed meeting her before walking away. I wasn't going to say anything, but Tommy rolled her eyes and said, "Somebody seems really impressed with himself." I laughed and said, "And interested in you." He didn't look pleased when I showed up. She sighed, looking a bit frustrated, and said, "Sometimes I just get so tired of guys trying to impress me all the time. It's nice, but it can get really old." I had a quick choice to make. My first thought was to say, "I can see why guys are interested in you, Tommy. You're really beautiful." But I didn't want to seem flirty. I wanted to be honest and friendly, non-threatening was my main goal. So I decided to make a joke instead. "That's funny," I said, pretending to think. "Guys don't really pay attention to me. Maybe a couple of times at the gym." I let my voice fade, looking confused, and Tommy burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that she almost spilled her soda, and I laughed too. It was a nice moment. At the end of the night, I dropped her off at her apartment, and like the first time, she kissed me on the cheek. I wasn't sure if I had ever ended a second date this way before, maybe when I was much younger. But I felt good about it, so I decided not to push it with Tommy. 3 days later, I knew I had made the right choice. Tommy called me in the morning and asked me to stop by her desk before lunch. When I got there, she had the concert schedule out. "How would you feel about The Rite of Spring this time?" she asked right away. "That's by Stravinsky, right?" I replied. "Nice memory. she said. And there's a Bartok piano piece that's a bit unusual but really exciting. We picked the date and I said, "You'll get the tickets right after lunch." And listen, Jack? Tommy seemed a little unsure. "You've been paying for all the tickets." "Well," I laughed, "my aunt covered the first set." "Okay, but you bought the others." So I thought, how about I make dinner this time? "Sure," I said. "That sounds great. I eat anything. Steak, seafood, you name it." She laughed and playfully hit my arm. "I was thinking of pork and beans from a can." "That works for me. Do you want sauerkraut, or should I bring some?" When I arrived at Tommy's apartment, I noticed she seemed a bit nervous, which made me feel good. If she saw me just as a friend and concert buddy, she wouldn't be nervous having me over. I had thought about bringing flowers, but chose a big chocolate cake instead. Flowers felt too much like asking someone out, which I wanted to avoid. She opened the box and exclaimed, "Wow, this looks amazing and rich. You'll need to work out more this weekend, but it's worth it. Thanks, Jack." She had cooked us chicken cacciatore with pasta and made a lovely salad. It was delicious, and it was clear she had put a lot of thought into it. Another good sign. As soon as we sat down, I started asking her questions about Bartok and Stravinsky, which helped her relax. We chatted, ate, and laughed before we realized it. We were close to missing the concert. "Oh no," Tommy said, glancing at the clock. "We should hurry." "I'm sorry, Jack, we didn't even get to the cake." "How about if we come back and have dessert afterward?" That sounded great to me. "Sure, Tommy, just grab your coat." I cleaned up the dishes and left them by the sink in her kitchen, and we stepped outside. Stravinsky's Rite of Spring was not really my favorite. Picture 100 musicians on stage, all playing loudly and trying to outdo each other for over half an hour. I wouldn't mind if I didn't hear that again soon. But the Bartok piano concerto was enjoyable, and being with Tommy, my main reason for being there, was wonderful. She seemed more relaxed and happy with me than ever, laughing and joking, sometimes touching my arm. During intermission, when I went to get sodas, I noticed her. In just a short time, 3 guys approached her, but she sent them away. To my surprise, she came to join me in line, and we chatted about the music while we waited. On our walk back to her apartment after the concert, Tommy's cheerful mood shifted. She became quiet and a bit distant, and I suspected what was troubling her. When we were half a block away, I said, "Listen, Tommy, it's getting late. Should we skip dessert tonight and save it for another time?" She stopped and looked at me seriously. "No, Jack, it's..." Holding my hand, she said, "I'd like you to come up, but Jack, I'm not going to sleep with you." For a moment, I wanted to respond playfully, but I took a deep breath. Instead, I smiled and said, "That's fine, Tommy." After a moment, I added, "I would just be really disappointed to go home without a piece of that cake." That made her laugh, which eased the tension. Once we were inside, I headed straight for the sink to wash the dishes. Tommy looked surprised, but then smiled and said, "Well, you certainly are full of surprises." While I finished the dishes, she put away the leftovers, made coffee, and cut us some cake. We sat at the table eating it, talking about Bartok, Stravinsky, and some amusing stories about our co-workers. But then the conversation quieted, and Tommy looked unsure again. Not wanting to push her, I stood up and said, "Thank you again for dinner, Tommy. It was wonderful, and the whole evening was fun." I walked around the table and gently helped her to her feet. Looking into her eyes, I said, "I'd like to cook for you next time. Would that be okay?" I felt pleased when she took my hand and walked with me toward the door. "Yes, Jack, and you know I enjoy filet mignon and lobster too." The smile on her face made it clear that she would welcome a goodnight kiss, so I held her gently and gave her a sweet kiss. Nothing forceful, just warm and caring. When I released her, she smiled and said, "Good night, Jack," then kissed me back and squeezed my hand before letting go. As I walked back to my apartment, I couldn't stop smiling. On one hand, this was the slowest courtship I could imagine, especially for 2 grown-ups. It felt like being back in high school in the Midwest, in the 50s. But on the other hand, I was really enjoying myself. Tommy was beautiful, smart, and had a great sense of humor. She seemed to be interested in me, though a bit cautious. What was there not to smile about? Our next date was a simple Friday night dinner at my place. There was nothing at the symphony that Tommy wanted to see, and I think she was starting to feel comfortable with us dating. We didn't need to pretend it was just about her teaching me music anymore. I'm a pretty good cook. I did a lot of the cooking when I was married to Amy. So I made marinated grilled lamb chops, risotto, and an avocado salad as a little surprise. When Tommy arrived, I showed her around my cozy two-bedroom condo, which I kept clean. Then she sat at the kitchen table while I finished the risotto and dressed the salad, and we carried the food out to my small dining room table. "This looks really nice, Jack," she said with a smile. "I'm impressed." "Oh, I almost forgot. Please sit down and close your eyes for a moment. I remembered what you told me." She looked at me with curiosity, but I just waited, and then she smiled and closed her eyes. I reached into my pocket and pulled out 2 small slips of paper, placing them on her plate. "Okay, open your eyes." She opened them, looked at her plate with confusion for a second, and then burst out laughing. In front of her were 2 small pictures from a cooking magazine, one of a stunning filet mignon and one of cooked lobsters. She giggled and said, "Well, that looks delicious." I replied, "You know we don't get paid much at Minestra, so we can't have filet and lobster all the time. But speaking of which, when is your birthday?" "June 28th, she replied. "All right, for your birthday, I'll take you out for surf and turf. Deal?" "Deal," she said, standing up to give me a gentle kiss on the lips. "I love your surprises, Jack," she said. Then we sat down to enjoy our dinner, talking, joking, and having a wonderful time together. I started to feel quite hopeful that something special might be happening with this fun and charming woman, and it filled me with joy. After we enjoyed dessert, which was a delicious apple pie Tommy brought, we found ourselves side by side, washing and drying the dishes. We gently bumped into each other every now and then. Tommy agreed to have another cup of coffee, so I poured us both a cup and took them into the living room. We sat close together on the sofa, talking, and when it got quiet, I noticed her looking at me with a small smile. I leaned in to give her a quick kiss, ready to pull back if she seemed hesitant. She wasn't hesitant at all, and we shared a sweet kiss while holding each other for about half an hour. Holding her made me want to be near her even more, and I was careful not to rush anything because I didn't want to scare her away. Finally, I thought it was the right moment, so I softly moved my hand down her arm, touching her gently. At first, she seemed to enjoy it and kissed me a bit more. But then after a moment she pulled back with a worried look on her face. I paused as tears began to fill her eyes. "Jack, I'm sorry, Shh, I said, bringing her back to me, resting her head on my shoulder. "It's okay. I love just being here with you." She relaxed a little bit, and I began to rub her head gently. I learned this from my dad when I was a kid. There's something wonderful about a gentle head rub. It can be so calming. I used to enjoy it when he did it for me, especially when I had trouble sleeping. I noticed that many women appreciated this too. It wasn't a way to win someone's affection exactly, but it felt like a kind and caring way to connect. I continued to rub Tommy's head for a few minutes, and she relaxed against me. Then, I shifted her so she could lie down with her head on my lap, letting me use both hands to gently massage her scalp. She made little happy sounds as I moved my fingers through her hair. I kept massaging for a while, and when I finally slowed down, she looked so peaceful, nearly falling asleep against my leg. Did I still have feelings for her? Absolutely. But in that moment, I felt very content. We stayed that way for a long time as I gently played with her hair. Around 10:45, I quietly said, "Tommy, it's getting a little late." She sat up looking a bit dazed and said, "Wow, I think I dozed off." She stretched, fixed her hair, and then looked at me with a serious expression. "Jack, that was the nicest thing any man has ever done for me. Come here." She reached for me and pulled me into her arms, giving me a warm kiss. After a moment, we found ourselves kissing again, this time with more urgency. She stood up, helping me to my feet as we continued to embrace until she asked, "So, when you showed me around, Jack?" "Yes?" I wasn't sure where she was going with this. Then she smiled and said, "I didn't really see your bedroom well. Can I check it out again?" What can I say about Tommy's first night with me? On one hand, it was like many first nights. On the other hand, it was truly amazing. We didn't do anything too unusual. We shared moments of closeness, lying on the bed and enjoying each other's company. I had been wanting to be with Tommy for a long time, so I was really eager. The first time we connected felt almost magical. We took a moment to prepare, which sometimes interrupts the mood, but we managed to keep it flowing. I felt joyful, and she smiled back at me as we grew even closer. It was all about the feelings we shared in that moment. Afterward, as I lay next to her, catching my breath and looking at her happy face, I wanted to tell her how long I had wanted this. Instead, I said, "Tommy, you are so beautiful. I'm really glad you're here with me." She smiled, kissed my shoulder, and snuggled closer. Tommy stayed overnight, and we shared another quiet moment together in the middle of the night. It wasn't as wild, but it was just as wonderful, filled with soft kisses before we drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I was bringing coffee back into the room, wearing only my boxers, when Tommy opened one eye and smiled at me. "Oh my God, that looks nice," she said. And I asked, "Me or the coffee?" "Both, actually, but I meant the coffee," she said. We enjoyed our drinks, sitting comfortably together against the headboard. I asked, "What do you want to do today? How about packing a picnic and heading to Brookside Park?" Tommy looked thoughtful, an expression I couldn't quite place, and then she asked, "Can I take a shower, Jack? Then we can talk." I got her a towel, gave her my bathrobe, and took her breakfast order. When she came out, looking and smelling great, we had fried eggs, English muffins, orange juice, and more coffee. I hoped she would ask me to marry her right then, but she just smiled and said, "Wow, that looks nice." "Go ahead and start. I'll be just a second." I took a quick shower, put on some shorts and a t-shirt, and hurried back to the kitchen. "So," I said while we were eating, "what do you think about a picnic? Or would you rather do something else? We could rent bikes and ride around or go to a movie." She looked a bit uncertain and said, "I'm not sure I'm ready for that, Jack. I mean, spending another day together." I must have looked confused. She sighed and continued, "It's a long story and not one I'm ready to share right now. Let's just say I'm feeling cautious. I've had some bad experiences before and—" She paused, as if trying to find the right words. I smiled at her, hoping to reassure her. "It's okay, Tommy. I'd much rather take our time and get it right. But you need to listen to me for a minute, all right?" She could see I was serious and looked into my eyes. "Yes, Jack. Of course, what is it?" This was not just a one-time thing for me. I wasn't just trying to rush things. I really like you and enjoy spending time with you. I hope we can do more of it. Understand? I added a playful scowl, and she gave me a lovely smile. "Yes, sir," she said, giving me a playful salute. "And Jack, it's not that I thought that about you. It's just that I haven't trusted my instincts lately." "As long as you don't give up on me," I replied. "I can go as slowly as you want." She came around the table, sat on my lap, and put her arm around me. "Thank you, Jack," she said, and we shared a sweet moment together. I couldn't say I was fully happy about her hesitation. In fact, it felt a little frustrating. Knowing about Tommy's past from what I had heard at the diner, I understood her feelings. Even so, I had hoped our wonderful night together would have helped her feel more comfortable. I called Allison to see if she was free that evening. I had known her for a couple of years, and we got together from time to time. Our meetings usually involved a lot of fun. That Saturday night, we went out for dinner, had drinks at her place, and enjoyed each other's company. I liked spending time with her, but it felt a little empty. I suppose it felt like a casual connection. Not bad at all. But the night before was something special. On Sunday, I was cleaning my apartment and listening to a baseball game online when Tommy called me. "Hey, Jack, it's Tommy. How are you?" "I'm good now that I'm talking to you. How's your weekend been?" We talked for a few minutes, and then she said, "Are you free next Saturday night? I'm having dinner at Prestissimo with my friends Katie and Eric. It'd be great if you could come." When Saturday arrived, we had a lovely evening. Katie and Eric were friendly and easy to talk to. I asked how Katie and Tommy met. They were in the same economics class in college. Tommy and I shared stories about life at Minestra, and we laughed a lot. I knew Tommy invited me partly so her friends could get to know me. I recognized Katie as the woman I had heard talking to Tommy at the diner, but I didn't mention it. After dinner, Eric invited us to their home in the suburbs for coffee. He promised to drive us back, and we agreed. They had a nice ranch house in a peaceful neighborhood, and we sat on their deck enjoying the calm evening. Katie asked Tommy to help her in the kitchen, and as they walked away, Eric noticed me chuckling. "What's up?" he asked with a smile. I replied, "I don't always understand women, but I have a pretty good idea of what's happening here." He smiled and said, "So you think they're talking about you?" "Exactly. And I guess you and I are meant to have a man-to-man chat so you can share your thoughts about me with Katie later." He laughed and said, "I guess it was a bit obvious. So tell me your secrets." I leaned in and said with a straight face, "When I was 9, I threw a banana peel into a mailbox." Eric burst out laughing. "Really?" I nodded, and soon we were sharing stories about silly or risky things we did as kids. He was laid back and funny, and I really enjoyed talking with him. When Eric dropped us off at Tommy's apartment, we stood outside and talked for a moment after he left. "How did I do?" I asked. She seemed a little shy. "Was it that obvious?" "No, but I figured you wanted to know what they thought of me. Honestly, I feel really flattered that you invited me to meet them. I can tell they are close friends of yours, and I like them a lot." She wrapped her arms around me. "Well, they liked you too, and so do I." She gave me a kiss and then another one. "Do you want to come up?" I replied carefully. "Only if you want. If tonight doesn't feel right, we can wait." In a soft voice, she said, "That was the perfect answer. It feels right to me." We spent the night together, and it was even better than the first time. We felt more relaxed and sure of each other. Holding her close brought me more happiness than I had ever known. In the morning, we showered together. Then Tommy made us breakfast, and we talked and enjoyed our meal until about 1 p.m. I was getting ready to leave since she had plans with a friend later that afternoon when she came up behind me as I buttoned my shirt and wrapped her arms around me. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," I said as I turned to face her. She looked a bit unsure. I kissed her on the forehead and we sat on the bed together. "Jack, I waited, and she continued. "We haven't really talked about what we're doing, what we mean to each other." I said, "Well, I think we're just getting to know each other, and I'm enjoying every minute. I think you're amazing, Tommy, just so you know." She smiled, but still looked a little worried. "So, are you comfortable with, "Oh, Jack, what I'm trying to say is, are we becoming a couple? Are we exclusive?" Before I could respond, she went on, "Because I really can't handle a casual relationship. Opening up to someone is not easy for me, and I took her hand. If you're asking what I want, I'd like us to be a couple, an exclusive." I chuckled and knelt down, saying, "How about we say we're going steady? Tommy, will you go steady with me?" "Don't tease, Jack." I apologize it was a playful moment, but I want to be someone special in your life for as long as you'll have me. There won't be anyone else for me." "That's exactly what I want too," she said seriously, looking deeply into my eyes. We kissed for a few moments to seal our feelings. On Monday at lunch, things felt different. Tommy seemed to have made a decision. She greeted me with a warm smile when we met at the elevators, and at the restaurant she made sure we sat next to each other. I liked this new vibe, but at first we didn't say much to the others. The usual talk about work filled the air, discussing canceled bonuses because of the economy and how the management didn't appreciate our hard work. Then Connie began lamenting about how dull Indianapolis was, how there was nothing to do, and we should all move to Chicago or New York. This was something she often complained about. Tommy simply said, "Oh, I don't know. I really don't think it's so bad." "The symphony is great," she continued. "Jack and I have been to several concerts, and they were wonderful." Everyone fell silent for a moment, then began teasing at once. "Oh my God, they're a couple. Are you guys really together? How did you ever get her to date you, Jack? Why would you waste your time with someone like him?" And so on. Tommy took my hand, and we smiled at each other, accepting the friendly teasing patiently, most of it directed at me, of course. Finally, I joked, "What can I say? I just swept her off her feet." Tommy playfully hit my arm when I said that. You all have missed my many great qualities, but Tommy clearly sees what you don't." Laughter and cheers followed, while Tommy gave me a sweet kiss on the cheek. After that day, I had to deal with some playful teasing from my male coworkers for a few weeks. The next day, Monty caught me in the restroom and wouldn't let up. "Are you really dating her? What's that like, Jack? How do you even focus at work?" He kept going on and on. "Come on, Monty," I replied. "Do you honestly think I'm going to discuss any of that with you? Tommy is a wonderful person and I care about her a lot. That's private, not your business." "Is she really as amazing as she seems? She must be something special, right?" He had no intention of stopping despite what I said. I heard similar teasing from a few other coworkers, but I never shared anything with them. I can tell you exactly how long things were wonderful. 7 weeks. They were more than just good. They were fantastic. Tommy and I saw each other a lot, spending 3 or 4 nights a week at each other's places. Most weekends, we were together the whole time. We went out to eat, rented bikes, hung out with Eric and Katie or other friends, went to the movies, and talked for hours. We did everything you do when you're really fond of someone you're falling for. We might have even held hands and run through a park, carefree and happy. We were close, too. Tommy was not overly loud or wild. Our time together was a mix of gentle moments and lively ones, but there was always a sense of warmth in it. For her, I think it's just who she is. For me, it was mainly because I was falling in love with her. I wanted to be kind and gentle with her. It didn't matter if I was giving her a nice head rub or just being close to her. It was all wonderful. Touching her, having her near me, and enjoying her company felt amazing. I've always liked giving people nicknames, except for Amy for some reason. I started calling her Tap, short for Tommy Ann Parker. I wouldn't have done it if she didn't like it, but she seemed to appreciate it. Sometimes I would jokingly call her Tappy or Tapster, but she usually just rolled her eyes at that. On her birthday, I took her out for a nice dinner. We had a couple of friends, Eric and Katie, with us. We enjoyed a lot of food and some champagne, and then we took a taxi home. That night, Tommy showed me a new level of closeness, and it was sweet and special. Afterward, we shared some intimate moments that made us both feel wonderful and excited. It was playful and free, which felt great. A few times, we went to my favorite bar with my friends Rudy and Cliff, who I had known since college. I had asked them to tone down their wild talk because Tommy was special and sensitive about that. Unfortunately, it didn't help much. As soon as we sat down, Cliff said, "Wow, looks like our friend is doing well. Tell me, Tommy, how much is he paying you for your time? He'll double it." Tommy turned red, and I quickly said, "Come on, Cliff, that's not cool. I guess it's been a while since you talked to a lady." "Sorry, Tap," I said to her. "These guys are all right, but they can be a bit rough." "No rougher than you, Jack," Rudy joked. "Remember those girls we knew in junior year? They were—" "Okay, Rudy, let's not go there," I interrupted, getting embarrassed. There weren't any girls like that, but I wasn't sure if Tommy knew. "Let's change the subject. How about the ballet? Did you both see this year's production of The Nutcracker? I thought the Sugar Plum Fairy was wonderful." I was relieved to see Tommy relax and start laughing with us. Rudy and Cliff toned down their teasing a little, and we ended up having a great evening together. On the way home, Tommy joked about how charming my friends were, so I thought everything was okay. It had been 7 weeks since we got together. One Sunday afternoon in early August, around 2 o'clock, we slept in at my apartment, shared a sweet moment, cooked breakfast, and then went shopping for groceries. We planned to relax and read the paper for a bit, and I hoped we could take a short nap. Then Tommy wanted to try a new recipe for dinner that she found. As I unlocked the door, our arms full of grocery bags, we heard the phone ringing. Tommy wanted to answer it quickly, but I said, "Don't worry, the machine will get it." I set the bags down and went downstairs to grab the last 2 bags by the front door. When I returned, Tommy was rushing out of the apartment, tears on her face. "Wait, what's wrong?" I asked. "You liar!" she yelled, looking very upset. Then she ran down the stairs and disappeared. I dropped the bags and hurried after her, but by the time I got to the front door, she was already leaving in a cab. What just happened? I went back inside and let myself in. I knew it had to be about the phone call, so I pressed the button on the answering machine. "Hey, it's Allison. I know Sunday is a weird time for a call, but I'd love to see you this afternoon. Call me back." Oh no. I hadn't spoken to Allison in 2 months, since before Tommy and I became serious. I hadn't even thought about her, but Tommy didn't know that. I called Tommy 5 or 6 times that day, but she didn't answer. After a few tries, I left a short message. Tommy, I promise Allison is just a friend, someone I used to see now and then. I haven't seen her in over 2 months since we talked about being exclusive. And being honest, please call me back. But she never responded. On Monday morning, I wanted to run to her desk and talk to her, but I decided against it. I skipped lunch with others and ate alone. That night, I called Katie and had a long talk with her. Thankfully, she cared, and I think she believed me. I'm really sorry this happened, Jack. Tommy has been hurt by guys before, and she can be quick to feel hurt again. I understand, Katie, and I feel awful. But I didn't do anything wrong. I really care about Tommy. I haven't said it directly yet because I didn't want to push her. She sighed. Let me see what I can do. You'll try to meet her for lunch and we'll call you after. It might take me a few days, though. Thanks, Katie. I really owe you. I don't want to lose her, and I don't want her to be hurt because of a misunderstanding. On Tuesday, I decided to try having lunch with my usual group, but Tommy wasn't there. She didn't show up on Wednesday either. Irene must have noticed my concern. She asked if something was wrong, but I just shook my head, and she didn't ask more. On Thursday, I chose to eat alone again. As I walked outside, I spotted Tommy walking alone about 50 yards ahead of me. I just followed her to see where she was going, not wanting to bother her until Katie had spoken with her. I was surprised by how many guys tried to talk to her. It was lunchtime and the streets were busy, but in just 3 blocks, it felt like 8 or 10 guys approached her. I couldn't see how she responded, but she managed to send them away. One guy kept trying to chat for a block and a half until she pointed at him and raised her voice. I saw her go into a small cafe, so I went somewhere else for lunch, thinking about Tommy and what it must be like to get that kind of attention all the time. No wonder she was careful. That night after dinner, Katie called me. She's feeling better, Jack. We had lunch downtown today. She has calmed down a lot, and I can tell she misses you, even if she wouldn't say it. She started off crying to me about how you were just like the others who had hurt her, and I let her go on for a bit. After we ate, I told her about our talk and tried to show her that it wasn't what she thought. What really helped is that she trusts my opinion and knows I like you. In short, you should call her. I think she's ready to hear your side in person. Thank you, Katie. I really don't know what I would have done without you. It sounds cheesy, but it's true. I've been trying to be patient, but I was worried she'd give up on me without even trying. We ended the call, and I instantly called Tommy. When she picked up, I said, "Hi, Tommy, please don't hang up. Could you let me explain that message before you decide to cut ties?" "Okay, Jack," she replied, sounding sad. "Katie made me realize I should at least talk to you. Why don't we grab lunch tomorrow?" "If you want, I could be there in 10 minutes, I said, but she only sighed and said, "No, I don't think so. I don't want you at my place right now. Let's meet for lunch at 12:15, okay? Could we do dinner instead? I don't want our conversation to be rushed with work coming up." There was a pause, and then she agreed, though reluctantly. "Thanks, Tommy, I really appreciate it. How about we meet at the Acropolis Diner?" I didn't see Tommy at all the next day, and I skipped lunch with my group. When I got to the Acropolis at 5:45, she was waiting for me in a booth. She looked worn out and sad. I leaned down to kiss her cheek, but she pulled away and shook her head, so I just sat across from her. "Hello, Jack," she said quietly. "Let's order first, okay?" After we looked at the menu and gave our orders to the waitress, I said, "Can I go first, Tommy?" She nodded. "But I don't want any nonsense, Jack. If you're not going to be honest, we can just leave and go our separate ways." I noticed her eyes starting to glisten with tears. I reached across the table to take her hands. She tried to pull away, but I gently held on, and she relaxed. "Tommy, I love you. I haven't said it before because I didn't want to scare you, but I do. I want to explain Allison's message. I will tell you everything and answer any questions you have. If after that you want to walk away, well, I hope you won't. Let's just leave it at that." I smiled at her, and she managed a slight smile back. Before you and I started seeing each other, I went out with a few women, including Allison. They were all casual friendships. Allison and I were sort of friends who sometimes spent time together, but we weren't close. We saw each other every now and then, when one of us felt lonely. I haven't seen her since May, the night after the first Friday night you stayed with me. Tommy's face changed, but she stayed quiet, so I continued. I wanted to spend the next day with you, you remember? But you felt things were moving too fast and left. I was disappointed and a little hurt, so I called Allison and we met that night. We had dinner and spent time together. And when it was over, I missed you. I didn't feel guilty because we hadn't made any promises yet, but I wished I was with you instead of with Allison. I promise. I haven't talked to her or seen her since that night. The message you heard was just a typical call we used to make. She had no idea I was now in a relationship. I paused and leaned back. Tommy was looking at me closely, her eyebrows knitted and tears on her cheeks. She asked, "Is this really the truth, Jack? Can I trust you?" I replied, "As God is my witness, I swear to you." She looked at me for a moment longer, then stood up and came over to my side of the booth. "Move over," she said, her voice a bit shaky. Then she wrapped her arms around me, hugging and crying, while I comforted her with soft words, feeling happy to hold her again. We did this for about 10 minutes, ignoring the cheerful faces around us. Finally, I said, "How about you sit next to me while we eat? I don't want to lose you again." She giggled and nodded. We sat side by side, bumping thighs and elbows while we talked about everything that had happened, how we missed each other, and how silly it was to let a misunderstanding make us upset for so long. When dessert time came, Tommy said she was full, but I insisted on ordering 2 big pieces of the chocolate cake like the one I had brought on our first dinner date. "Now go sit across from me because I have a couple of things to tell you." She looked surprised, and I quickly said, "Just little things, I promise." I took her hands and said, "I promise I will never lie to you, but I did tell you a small lie once and I need to tell you about it." With a sad look, I explained, "My aunt didn't send me those orchestra tickets. I bought them because I hoped you would go out with me." Tommy smiled and teased, "That's terrible. Your punishment is paying the bill." "I plan to do that anyway. How about my punishment is taking you somewhere nice for dinner this weekend?" She agreed. Then I continued, "That was my first and only lie to you. But there's more. When we met at Minestra, that wasn't the first time I saw you." "Really? I don't remember seeing you before." "It was here, at the Acropolis. That's why I wanted to come back here tonight." I shared my whole story, explaining how drawn to her I felt, and the conversation I'd overheard between her and Katie. "I heard you talk about how hard it was to be treated poorly and how badly the men around you had acted. When I saw you, I was amazed and a little ashamed. After that day, I promised myself I wouldn't be the kind of person who treated women badly. When we met at Minestra, I wanted to show you I was a good, honest guy, not someone only focused on getting close to you. I didn't know if we'd ever go out or even be friends, but at least I could act like a kind and respectful colleague." She smiled at me. "Is that why it took you so long to ask me out and why you made up that silly story about your aunt? Pretty ridiculous, right? But yes, exactly. I wanted you to see me as a friend first, to understand what I was really like. I hoped that going to a concert together would feel less like a date and more like just having fun with a friend." Tommy took one of my hands and kissed it. "Well, it seems to have worked. I didn't realize how charming you were until it was too late. Now I'm in love with you, so I guess I'm in this for the long haul." "Wait a minute. In love with me?" She nodded, trying to keep a serious face. I paused for a moment before saying, "I think we need to get the check and leave." We were lying in my bed, Tommy cuddled up against me, and I wondered if I could be any happier. We had rushed back from the concert and jumped into bed, excited to be together. Afterward, we rested, cuddled, and kissed, and shared gentle moments again, filled with whispers and soft promises. Tonight was special because it was the first time we had said, "I love you," and it felt important to both of us. "Hey," she said softly, "are you asleep?" "Not yet," I replied, pretending to snore. She poked me. "I'm serious, Jack. I need to talk to you, but we can wait until morning if you prefer." "No, I'm awake." I shifted, sitting up against the headboard with a pillow behind me. "This sounds important." "It is. Well, not bad important. But I need to share some things about my past. You might know a bit from what I spoke about with Katie. but I want to tell you everything so you'll understand why I reacted the way I did when I heard the message on your machine." I kissed her forehead. "I will listen to whatever you want to share. You don't have to if you're not ready, but I'm here." Okay. Some of this you might have guessed. By the time I was 13, I was already getting a lot of attention from guys, way more than my 16-year-old sister Alice. I really didn't know how to handle it, and Alice wasn't helpful. She was more jealous than supportive. My parents didn't notice anything either. I felt like I was going through it all alone. Like many teenage girls, she just wanted to fit in and was flattered by the attention from boys. Unfortunately, that led to some tough experiences with people she thought were friends. But what happened later was perhaps even harder to share. In my senior year, I faced a really difficult situation with a friend's father. He was tall and good-looking, and we all thought he was charming. He was always nice to Rita's friends, and her house was our favorite place to hang out. We often had pizza parties and sometimes spent the night there. One night during a sleepover, he sat with us girls and had a drink. There were about 5 of us. Rita's mom was away visiting her grandmother. Eventually, we all fell asleep. In the middle of the night, Rita's dad woke me up and said he needed to talk. I was tired and a bit dizzy. He took me to his room, sat next to me on the bed, and said I was special. He told me I was not just pretty, but also smart and caring. He said I was the only person who understood him. He felt like his wife was too busy with her own work to pay attention to him anymore. Tommy looked at me. "I know this sounds like a usual story, Jack, but I was just 18 then, and it was all new to me. He was a handsome older man that I liked. He started to kiss me, and I felt excited. We were close for a while, and I was really happy. We spent time together for hours. I thought it was special. In the morning, I quietly went back to the room where the other girls were sleeping. After that, we met whenever we could for about 4 months. I thought I was in love. He hinted that he might want to be with me, and I got carried away with that idea. I was naive. Thankfully, he had taken some steps regarding fatherhood, so I didn't think about that side of things. We kept everything a secret from his wife and from Rita. We would meet in motels or at his house when Rita and her mom were busy. He enjoyed being with someone who was still learning about relationships. We explored new things together, even though some didn't feel right for me. Then one day, I went over to do some studying with Rita after school, and when I rang the doorbell, her mom opened the door. She was furious and slapped me. She called me names and told me to leave and never come back. The next day at school, Rita wouldn't speak to me. Even worse, she told everyone that I had been with her dad. She was really hurt, but she took it out on me instead of him. I later found out her mom kicked him out, and they got divorced about a year later. This time, even my parents heard about it because Rita's mom called them and yelled. They were really upset with me. I tried to explain that Arthur had tricked me. My mom seemed to understand a little, but my dad was so mad that he didn't talk to me for a month. My last year of high school was a real struggle. The other kids made my life really hard, and some male teachers acted inappropriately toward me. I had to warn them I'd tell the principal if they didn't stop bothering me. Tommy spoke calmly and didn't show any emotion as she shared this tough story. I could tell she had already shed all her tears long ago. I hugged her and said, "I'm so sorry. That sounds really terrible." She smiled a little and said, "It wasn't great. You've heard most of it, but I can share the rest quickly." "There's more?" "Oh yeah, college." She paused for a moment before continuing. "You know I transferred, right? I spent a year and a half at Ball State and then finished at Indiana University?" I nodded. "Well, there was a reason. Some professors at Ball State acted inappropriately toward me. They tried to charm me, but after Arthur, I could see right through them. There was also an accounting professor who tried to bully me during my sophomore year. He gave me low grades on my first 3 assignments. When I went to talk to him, he made it clear he wanted something in return for better grades. He told me that if I didn't agree to his demands, he would fail me, and I would lose my scholarship." "Wow," I said. "I know things like that happen, but that's shocking." "Yeah." By then I was a bit wiser. I told him I needed time to think and said I'd return the next week. When I came back, I had a tape recorder hidden in my bag and 2 friends waiting just outside his office. I got him to repeat what he had said about my grades and his demands, and then I reported him. I took the recording to the dean with my friends to support me, and he was fired within a week. "Good for you, that's great. Yes, but it was still a mess. They tried to keep my name out of it, but news spread quickly, and the student newspaper published an article with my name and photo, so it was clear I had to leave. My grades were good enough to transfer, so I applied to Indiana and left the next semester. She gave me a little kiss and said, "Almost done, just a bit more of Tommy's story. I could listen to you for hours. I'm really sorry you had to go through all this." By the time I got settled at Indiana University, I thought I had seen it all. I was very cautious and careful. I still got attention from guys all the time, but I just ignored them. I probably had no more than 5 dates in my first 2 years there. If it felt like a guy just wanted to take advantage of me if I got even a small hint of that, I would cut ties with him right away. I never went out alone. I always went with friends. One time, I was at a party with my friend Monica, and she really came to my rescue. Some guy messed with my drink. Thankfully, she was dancing, but she noticed 2 guys trying to lead me toward the exit, looking like I was barely awake. She yelled loudly and ran to me, and those guys ran off. I was lucky she was there. Since then, I always keep a close eye on my drink when I'm out. I just shook my head. Who would harm someone like that? What kind of person thinks that is acceptable behavior? But even with all that caution, I got hurt one more time. In my senior year, there was a grad student named Rick. My roommate introduced us at the student center. He had been her teaching assistant, and she thought he was a great guy. We dated for a couple of months, and he never pressured me for anything, always saying, "Whenever you're ready." Finally, I let my guard down and we became intimate. That's all he seemed to care about, day and night. I could hardly focus on studying. He had an apartment off campus, and I spent most of my time there. After about 2 months of this, he suddenly ended things with me. He broke my heart, saying, "It was fun, but I don't think we're meant to be." 2 weeks later, I saw him at a campus pub acting all sweet with someone else. Once more, I gently pulled her close and held her silently. "Nothing really special about that last story," she said. "Just another guy being inconsiderate. It happens all the time. But it's happened to me so many times. Since college, I've dated a lot and had a few boyfriends, but nothing too serious. Many men just left me when I didn't become intimate after a few dates. I'm 27 now, and I've only had 2 real relationships before you, Rick, and another guy named Scott from about a year ago." "I know about him," I replied. "You mentioned him to Katie in the diner." "It feels like a real struggle sometimes to be attractive," she exclaimed. "I look in the mirror and see that I am appealing, reasonably pretty, but I'm not a model or anyone famous. Why can't men just give me space? Why is it okay for them to approach me and say things like, 'I noticed you and was really interested,' or 'I'd love to take you on a fun trip'?" "Really?" I asked. "Yes, really. I've heard all kinds of comments like that. Some are just not respectful at all." "Well, I said carefully, I think you're beautiful too. But I also think you're funny, smart, caring, and really enjoyable to be around. And I like how you cook, and how you talk about music, and the silly way you load the dishwasher," I said, pausing after each phrase to kiss her neck, "and the way you leave your socks on in bed, and how you laugh at my silly jokes." I stopped talking because Tommy was giggling. I turned her head and we started kissing. We kissed for a long time. "I love you," I said. "I'm not the type to treat you badly, and I promise I will never do that." "I know that," she replied. After that dinner at the Acropolis and our wonderful time together, along with Tommy's long story about everything she had faced, things just got better. It felt like she trusted me more, and every moment we spent together made me happy, no matter what we were doing. I began to think seriously about marriage, but I knew I wouldn't take that step without talking to my brother David. He was hardly ever around, so I had to wait until he visited enough to really get to know Tommy. Once I got his approval, Tommy and I got married. Looking back at everything that happened since then, if I had known then what I know now, would I have still married her? That's a tough question. My big brother David has been my role model since I was a kid. Not just because he was 8 years older, but because he was the shining star, an all-state lacrosse player in high school, had many girlfriends, and graduated at the top of his class at MIT with 2 majors, electrical engineering and international relations. I played lacrosse too, but I didn't make the starting team until my senior year. I had a couple of dates and one serious girlfriend, Darlene Brower, for about 2 months. I did well in school at Ohio State, graduating with a degree in computer science. I did okay, but I was no David. After college, I worked in a few IT jobs, first in Columbus, Ohio, and later in Indiana, eventually landing at Minestra. David, on the other hand, got a training internship right away and then a job traveling the world for IBM. But it wasn't really for IBM. David didn't talk much about his work, but I could tell he was involved in something secretive, CIA, NSA, or some other government agency, though I had no idea. I didn't ask because I didn't really want to know. Whenever someone asked him about his job, he had a vague but believable answer. The only thing I knew was that he was home in the U.S. just a few times each year, and you never knew where an email would find him. But that wasn't the only reason I admired him. He was also a fantastic big brother, a guide, protector, and friend. Our age difference meant we never felt competitive with each other. He truly looked out for me and gave me advice at every point in my life about girls, about school, about handling mom and dad, even about marrying Amy, though I didn't really listen. David had met Amy a few times, and we all spent time together during his rare visits home. He never directly told me not to marry her, but his lack of excitement was clear. I noticed it, but I ignored it. I was just 24, and in love. When I discovered she wasn't being honest with me and the marriage fell apart, David was there for me as a good friend without saying, "I told you so." He came to visit several times, allowing me to cry and express my anger about what happened. He helped me get back on my feet, and then he went back overseas to do his work. Now, 5 years after my first marriage ended, I was in love again. I wanted to marry Tap, but I knew I needed David to meet her first. I completely trusted his opinion, so I emailed him in August, and he arranged a quick visit to Indianapolis in late September. Tommy, David, and I spent all day Saturday together, went out for dinner, and then met for brunch the next day before I took him to the airport. "Wow, little brother, she is quite a woman," was the first thing he said when we were alone in the car. "I know," I replied. "It's almost overwhelming how much I want her. I can't help but worry about how other guys feel, too." "But," he said, "she really cares about you. She's kind, thoughtful, and funny. She's great." "Do you really think so? I need your honest opinion, David. I know what you thought about Amy. You weren't too fond of her, and you were right." He sighed. "Yeah, I was sorry about that, but Tommy feels different. I don't know her well, but I just get a different vibe." He laughed. "So why does she love you exactly?" "Honestly, I have no idea, but I'm not complaining. I guess she thinks I'm a decent guy. Just don't tell her otherwise." Since I really wanted him to come, David made another visit for Thanksgiving. Our parents were gone, so we were all the family we had, besides a few distant cousins. Tommy and I prepared Thanksgiving dinner at my apartment. She invited Alice and her husband Trevor to come from Toronto, and we all had a lovely day together. David was charming and funny, as he always was. I noticed how well he handled questions about his work without anyone realizing he hadn't given a clear answer. Alice seemed pleased that I did my share of the cooking, serving, and cleaning. It looked like Trevor was more of the old-fashioned type who believed those tasks were the woman's job, so this earned me some points with her. When I drove David to the airport on Saturday, we went early so we could enjoy a long lunch and have a serious conversation. I got straight to the point. "You've met her twice now, David, and spent time with both of us. You even met her sister. What do you honestly think?" "I like her a lot, Jack, but I told you that last time. What else do you want me to say?" "I'm not sure, to be honest. I want to marry her, and I guess I want your support. It's not just a blessing, but I want you to tell me you think I'm making the right choice this time." David was a very clever guy. He looked at me for a while. "Okay, Jack. Well, Tommy truly cares for you, and the two of you get along really well. I saw how you both handled Thanksgiving dinner sharing tasks, communicating effectively, being sweet and supportive with each other, with many little compliments and warm glances. I can tell she's smart, in addition to being really attractive. And she has a great sense of humor, although she seems to think you're funny, which I usually consider a bad sign." I nudged him lightly on the shoulder, typical brotherly teasing. "So, what's really bothering you?" he asked. "Me?" The question took me by surprise. "Yeah, you both love each other. There's not just a strong attraction but also friendship and respect, so why are you worried?" I leaned back and thought for a moment. Wow, I always forget how sharp you are. Okay, I really want to marry Tommy. I want to be with her for the rest of my life, but yes, I have some worries. First, my marriage to Amy was such a mess. It would really hurt to go through that again. Let me ease your mind about that, David said with a smile. Tommy is not Amy. She's not selfish or shallow, and she truly cares about you. What else is on your mind? 3 things, I replied, feeling a little uneasy. I've been thinking about this for weeks, but most of my concerns seem minor, so it comes down to 3 main ones. First, I worry that she might not want to be as close after a few years. That was an issue with Amy. At first we were always together, but after a while it felt like I was the only one who wanted to be close. She seemed fine with just once a week. Sounds like you're overthinking it, David said encouragingly. But I'll listen to your other concerns. Anyway, I really don't want to go through that again. Second, I'm a bit worried about how suspicious she is. I've told you a little about how poorly men have treated her in the past, but you can't imagine how bad it really was. We almost broke up after 2 months because of a message she heard from an old friend of mine. It took her friend Katie to help calm her down enough to listen to my side. And I worry that something similar might happen again, some small thing that could upset her. So that's 2. The last point is how attractive she is. Men are drawn to her in a way that's hard to believe. I once followed her down the street and saw how many guys tried to talk to her. It's not that I don't trust her. I do. I know she loves me and is not looking around. It's just that if, after a few years, she gets a bit bored with me, or we have a fight and she gets upset, there will always be some good-looking guy around trying to get her attention. One thing I appreciate about my brother is that he thinks carefully before speaking. I watched him listen and reflect, and we ate in silence for a few minutes before he responded. Well, he said, about the first point, I'm not the best person to help you there. I've never been married or had a relationship last more than a few months. Really? No Natasha in Smolensk? No Anna in Azerbaijan? Or maybe a Louisa in Venice? I'm impressed, Jack. That's more geography than I expected from you. But no, I don't have any long-term relationships. But I think that if 2 people are married and love each other, and they talk well with each other, they should be able to work things out. It's all about compromise, right? Like one person likes the window open while the other one likes it closed. You find a way to deal with it. I don't know, sometimes you have to handle things on your own, or she can help in other ways. And sometimes maybe she's just tired or not really in the mood, but she does things with you because she cares. He thought for a bit. I don't see the third point as a deal breaker either. I mean, I agree that Tommy is very attractive. He looked at me. There's something special about her. If she weren't with you, I can see myself liking her too. So I understand your concern. But as long as she loves you and is happy, she's probably seen all kinds of guys trying to flirt with her and knows how to handle them. So unless things go wrong in your marriage or you do something foolish to mess it up, he said with a grin, the fact that other guys find her attractive shouldn't really matter. But her suspicions, that sounds tougher. She needs to really trust you, Jack, if this marriage is going to work. This is true for everyone, but it is especially important for Tommy. I would definitely marry her, don't let her get away. But you must talk a lot, stay in touch with how she feels, and not let any problems build up between you. I would tell this to anyone who wants to get married, but it's especially important for both of you. And can you please plan the wedding for when I am in town? We did plan it that way. We got married at the end of April. Katie and Tap's sister Alice were the 2 matrons of honor, and I asked Eric to be my co-best man along with David, who flew in from overseas for 3 days. Everything about the wedding was lovely, except when Tommy scowled at the minister when he said, "Do you, Thomasina Ann Parker?" She doesn't like her full name at all and won't let me use it, even as a joke. My favorite moment of the day came late in the evening, at the post-reception party, when a small group of our closest friends were relaxing in our honeymoon suite with a couple of bottles of champagne. Everyone gave a toast, some of them teasing me, and then it was my turn. I got up, a bit tipsy, and smiled at everyone. I know you all think I'm going to say something sappy about my new bride, how beautiful, kind, smart, and funny she is, and how I will do everything I can to make her as happy as she makes me. There were groans, ahs, and some playful laughter in response. But before I get to that part, I want to raise a glass to Katie and Eric Tommy's friends, and now mine, two people I really respect and trust. They are an unusual couple, very different from each other, and it's hard to see how they stay together. I had a smile on my face, and my friends started to sense a funny story was coming. In the last 2 days, each of them took the time to talk to me about Tommy Katie's. Words were vague, while Eric's were very clear. It was actually quite amusing. Katie said to me, "What was it?" "Oh, yes. Katie said I better take good care of Tommy or I'd be in trouble." Very general, right? But Eric said, "Jack, if you ever hurt Tommy, you'll regret it." Laughter erupted in the room, and I raised my glass over the noise, saying, "Here's to Tommy's two great friends and protectors." Were we happily married? Yes and no. For the first 4 years, yes. I was happy almost beyond my wildest dreams, but I believe Tommy was happy too. But after that, over a year and a half or 2 years, it just seemed to fade away, gradually, and I couldn't make it stop. Our honeymoon in Cancun was wonderful. Coming home and starting our life together as husband and wife was great. Buying a house close to Katie and Eric and settling in together felt perfect. I don't know how to say it without using common phrases. Tommy made me feel whole. I woke up every day smiling, seeing her head on the pillow next to me. I knew we'd have breakfast together, drive to work together, and often share lunch. Then we would come home and enjoy our evenings together. She was funny, supportive, surprising, and gentle. She loved me, and always showed me how much. Our intimate moments were amazing. It wasn't that she was overly adventurous, nor was I, or that we had anything unusual. Our moments together were probably like those of many married couples, sometimes fun and lively, other times relaxed and close. But just seeing her in the kitchen cooking made me feel excited. Watching her smile when we toasted our drinks made me happy. Reading her light-hearted emails brought a smile to my face. I worried that we might not match well in our desires as I had before, but those worries were unfounded. I started things more often than Tommy, but there were many times she was eager, and she made that clear. Sometimes when I wanted to be close, she was tired or distracted, but she never said no without a gentle smile and a promise that she would be ready later. And she always kept her word. Even after months passed, there were weekends we spent hours in bed, enjoying each other's company, resting and starting over. I could never have enough of her, but I never felt unfulfilled. A couple of months after our second anniversary, Tommy turned 30, and she started thinking more about starting a family. I was nearly 34 and felt ready too, so we began the exciting process of trying to have a baby. At first, it was enjoyable, filled with planning and humor about timing and fun. But after a year without success, it began to feel more like a chore. Another 6 months passed without a pregnancy, and we decided to see a doctor. The news was hard to accept. While I was able to conceive, Tommy had a rare condition that meant she couldn't carry a baby. She had healthy eggs, but her body couldn't nurture them. Some problems like that might be solved with surgery, but 3 doctors confirmed it couldn't be fixed for her. I arranged for some days off from work, and we flew to the Outer Banks of North Carolina for a peaceful vacation. We rested a lot, especially Tommy, who was feeling very down, and we spent time on the beach talking. Sometimes, she would just sit and cry while I held her. When she seemed a bit better, I brought up the idea of adoption. "I don't know, Jack," she replied after thinking for a while. "I've thought about it too, but I'm not sure if that's what I want for us. I really wanted to have kids together." She started to cry again, and I held her closer. I felt disappointed too, but I wasn't as upset as she was. We talked some more that evening and decided to wait a few months before deciding about adoption, hoping our feelings might change over time. It wouldn't be accurate to say that everything changed after we learned we couldn't have children, but something was definitely different with Tommy. We slowly healed from the initial sadness and returned to our happy life together. Still, she seemed quieter and more reflective, sometimes feeling far away from me. We continued to share our thoughts, and I knew she wasn't hiding anything. It was just that sadness would wash over her like a wave, and I had to wait for it to pass. Sometimes it lasted a few hours. Other times it would stretch on for 3 to 4 days. One October evening, during our drive home from work, she said, "Jack, I've been thinking about finding a new job." "Oh?" "I like Minestra, and it's wonderful to see you during the day." She smiled and squeezed my hand. "But I'm feeling a bit bored, and with everything about having kids, I think a change would be good for me. Something new and challenging." So, Tommy spoke with Ben, her boss, who said he would miss her, but would give her a great recommendation. She started looking for new opportunities. She had 4 or 5 interviews for jobs as an executive secretary or personal assistant, and received 3 callbacks. In the end, she was considering a job with Damon Eberson, who ran a large furniture business in Indianapolis called Grand Valley Limited. He owned around 180 stores across the Midwest and had several factories around the country. As you might expect, interviewing for jobs can be tricky, especially for someone like Tommy. It was hard to tell if she was being hired for her skills or her appearance. More than that, she had to figure out if the hiring manager would be treating her professionally. Tommy had faced these situations more than anyone should have, and she shared some of her experiences with me. One manager, from a law firm, was overly eager during the interview. When Tommy firmly told him that she was happily married, he quickly ended the interview. "Unpleasant man," she simply called him. "So tell me about this Eberson," I asked. "Do you think he would be a good boss?" "I didn't meet him in the first round of interviews, which I thought was a good sign. A man named Don Harrington, one of his vice presidents, spoke with me, and I thought it went okay. In the second round, I had lunch with Damon. He's a sharp-dressed guy, maybe in his mid-40s, really fit and tan, like he plays tennis a lot. He's shorter than you and very direct. He told me right away to call him Damon and said he didn't like formalities. We discussed what he needed in a personal assistant, and there's nothing I can't handle or learn to do. They are offering me about 20% more than what I earn at Minestra." She smiled. "That's enough to freshen up your closet a bit, dear." This was a joke between us. I didn't enjoy shopping and usually wore the same outfits. Tommy loved to take me shopping for new clothes. "Did you accept the job?" "Not yet." She looked at me seriously. "There's something we need to discuss. Damon travels often and wants me to join him on some trips, mostly to take notes and help plan. It could mean being away for a few nights at a time, maybe every other month. I told him I couldn't agree without talking to you first." I felt a bit uneasy. Not about Tommy, but about this man I didn't know. I was aware of how some men might see her. "Can you tell me how the conversation went?" I was paying attention to him. He clearly thinks I'm attractive, but he was very professional, no staring, no flirting, no inappropriate comments. When he mentioned traveling, I said, "Damon, I just want to be clear, I'm a married woman, and I'm completely loyal to my husband." He seemed surprised for a moment. Then he smiled and shook his head, saying, "Oh, Tommy, it's nothing like that. These are work trips only. In fact, your husband can come along any time and stay in the hotel with you, as long as he covers his own costs. I won't need you in the evenings, so you two can enjoy a little vacation." That made me feel better. Wow, that sounds like a decent arrangement. I thought so too. She smiled at me. "I'm leaning toward taking the job, Jack, unless you think I shouldn't." We talked about it some more and agreed it seemed like a great chance. "Can I take you out for a nice dinner to celebrate? Maybe use a bit of that 20% raise?" She kissed me and said, "Absolutely. But first, we're stopping at Richard Avery's to buy you some new clothes." Tommy's first few months working for Damon went very well. He treated her with kindness. She liked her co-workers, and the work was interesting and challenging. I first met him at a fancy Christmas party at Grand Valley, and I was drawn to him. My mind calmed a bit when I saw his wife, Elena. She was younger than him by about 10 years and very attractive. She looked like she might be Mexican or from another Latin country, and she spoke with a lovely accent. From what I could see, they seemed very caring toward each other. In early January, Tommy went on her first business trip with Damon to Asheville, North Carolina, and I decided to take a few days off to join them. We had a great time together. As promised, Damon didn't need her in the evenings except for one dinner meeting. On the other nights, Tommy and I enjoyed our time together. I also went with them on another trip to Las Vegas in April and a few more during the summer. For trips I couldn't join because of work, Tap and I chatted on the phone every night. She sounded happy, and my usual worries about her not trusting men seemed unfounded. However, things took a turn in November. I couldn't reach her for our regular Saturday night call because she was in Tucson with Damon and some colleagues. Then, on Sunday morning, Damon called me. "Jack, I'm sorry to call like this. Everything's okay. Tommy's fine, but someone put something in her drink last night." "What?" I felt worried. "Is she all right? Should I come out there?" "No, it's fine. It was Don Harrington. He was trying to cause trouble, but I saw them and stepped in just in time. I took her to the hospital and she was there all night. Tommy's back at the hotel now getting ready to leave with help from one of the hotel staff. We're flying back in an hour. If you want to meet us at the airport, we'll be arriving around 5:45. "I'll call her," I said, but he added, "No, you probably shouldn't. She's still a little confused. We can explain everything when we get back." I was very worried all afternoon and arrived at the airport almost an hour before the plane landed. When Tommy came out, she looked tired but ran into my arms and we held each other tightly. "I'm really okay, honey. I'm exhausted, but I'm fine. Damon was there just in time, thank goodness." Damon welcomed me, and I thanked him warmly for helping Tommy. He smiled and said, "No problem, Jack. I'm just relieved she's all right. I need to get home to Elena, so I'll let Tommy fill you in. Tommy, if you need some time, take a day or two. Just let me know when you're ready to come back, okay?" On the way home, I finally got the full story from Tommy. She had been having dinner with Don Harrington, one of Damon's co-workers, in the hotel restaurant when she suddenly felt very dizzy. She never drank alcohol when I wasn't with her, so she was unsure about what had happened. Don helped her up from her chair and guided her toward the elevators, saying she needed to rest a bit. While we were waiting, I guess I must have been leaning on Don because I could hardly stand. Then Damon came over from the lobby and asked what was wrong. The next thing I remember, I was slipping to the floor and Don hurried out of the hotel as fast as he could. I only remember bits and pieces after that. Damon must have taken me to the hospital. I vaguely recall a kind older man in a white coat who checked my pulse, and then I must have dozed off. When I woke up this morning, Damon was sitting in a chair next to my bed. They gave me some oatmeal and toast, and after I ate, they said I could leave. So Damon took me back to the hotel where a receptionist helped me change my clothes and pack. Then Damon returned and took me to the airport. I slept a little on the plane, and by the time we landed, I felt more like myself again. I took Tommy inside, made her some soup, and helped her get to bed. She slept for 13 hours, and the next morning, she was determined to go to work. No, I really feel fine, and there's no way I'm letting that guy Don Harrington cost me a day of work. Besides, I want to see if he has the nerve to show up, and what Damon will do if he does. She added, "It's strange. I know things like this happen. Remember, someone tried to do something similar to me back in college? But I never thought it would be Harrington. When I first interviewed with him, honestly, I wondered if he might be gay. He had never made any moves or even flirted with me before this." That evening, when I picked up Tap from her office, she was in high spirits. "He got fired, Jack. You should have seen it. Damon called me into his office, and Don was there, looking so unhappy. Damon really let him have it. He said he could only think that Don had intended to hurt me, and he gave him 10 minutes to pack his things and leave. 'If I thought they'd convict you, I'd make sure you faced the consequences for this,' he said. He also told Don he wouldn't be getting a good word from him or anyone else at Grand Valley. 'You better find yourself another place to stay, Don,' Damon warned him. 'I know a lot of people in Indianapolis, and no one connected to me will hire you.' Don just stood there looking at the ground, not saying anything. Once Damon finished, Don turned around and left, not looking back at him or me. And then Damon said, 'I wanted you here for that, Tommy. I'm so sorry for what happened, and I feel responsible in some way. I would never have guessed he would.' For a few weeks after that, I felt uneasy about letting Tommy out of my sight, even if it seemed a bit silly. She kept telling me she was okay, that Harrington was gone, and that she was being careful. Gradually, I started to relax, but when she went to Miami and then Asheville again, I insisted on going with her. By Christmas, I thought we were back to normal. We had a lovely holiday, visiting Alice and Trevor in Toronto, and my brother David came by for New Year's. What I enjoyed most was the 3 quiet days in between. Just me and Tommy, snow on the ground, a warm fire each night, cuddling, talking, and being close. Life felt good. I thought I might bring up the idea of adopting children soon. We hadn't talked about it for a while, and it felt like the right time. I would be happy either way, but if Tommy wanted kids, I did too. I planned to have that conversation, but it never happened. In January, things began to change. Tommy became quieter, talked to me less, and spent more evenings by herself or on the phone. I asked her several times if something was wrong, either at work or between us, but she only said she was tired. A couple of times, she got annoyed and told me to stop bothering her. One evening in late February, I decided to visit Katie and Eric, who lived about 6 blocks away. Tommy was in New York with Damon, her first trip alone since that troubling incident with Harrington. "Hey, Jack, what's up?" Eric said when he opened the door. He seemed surprised but friendly enough. However, when Katie walked up behind him and saw me, her tone was cold. "What are you doing here?" I was taken aback. Actually, Katie, is something wrong between us?" There was silence. She turned and walked away into the back of the house. "Geez, Eric," I said, "what just happened? Did I do something wrong?" Eric looked a bit awkward as he guided me into his study to talk. "Here's the deal, Jack. I honestly don't know what's happening, but Katie is upset with you because Tommy is upset." "Why?" "I came here tonight because I wanted to figure this out. I didn't mean to intrude, but I need to understand." He looked closely at me for a moment, and then said, "Let me get Katie, and we'll talk." They returned together and sat side by side on the small couch, facing me. Katie's expression was serious but not angry. "Katie, can you help me? Tommy is upset with me and she won't say why. Now it seems like you're upset with me too." She glanced at Eric, who nodded and replied, "I don't really think he knows, babe." Leaning forward, she said, "Tommy is worried about your marriage, Jack. She thinks you might be unfaithful. Even if you haven't done anything yet, she feels like you might—" "What?" I stood up. "Why would she think that? I haven't done anything. I love her more than I did when we got married. What is going on?" 3 weeks ago in January, Tommy and I went to Cincinnati for Emily's bridal shower. We were away Saturday and Sunday. Remember? She spoke to me like I was a child. "Of course." "What did you do that Saturday night?" I thought back. "I was with my friend Rudy. We went to Pizzeria Uno, then a bar, and had a couple of beers." "Why? And what about the woman in the red dress you were with? You're not going to say that was Rudy, are you?" "You don't wait. Is that what this is about? How did you know?" I felt a wave of anger and took a few deep breaths. "I was at the bar while Rudy was in the restroom. Suddenly, this woman in a red dress comes up and hugs me, acting like she knows me. I tried to push her away. At first, she didn't let go, but I pressed harder, and when I looked into her eyes, she said, 'Oh my God, you're not Brent,' and backed away, looking really embarrassed. So she thought I was her boyfriend. She apologized a lot, and we laughed for a moment before she left. I think she went to find him or something. I remember her saying, 'Good thing he's not here yet, he wouldn't have liked seeing me kiss you.' But what does this have to do with me and Tommy? It was nothing. I thought it was a funny story to tell her, but then I figured it would just upset her, so I decided not to mention it. I haven't thought about it since." Katie replied, "Somebody saw you and told Tommy, Jack. She didn't tell me who, just that you were with a woman at the bar. And she didn't bring it up to me? She believed that story without asking me? Wow, Katie." I looked at Eric. "You don't believe this, right?" "I would never do that." He shook his head, looking sad. "No, I don't believe it." I don't think Katie truly understands either, but she has spoken to Tommy a few times recently, and it seems Tommy is feeling really anxious. Katie nodded and said, "She doesn't know what to make of it, Jack. She thinks that if it was nothing serious, you would have told her about it, and it seems this isn't the first time something like this has happened." "What do you mean?" She raised her hands as if trying to calm me. "I'm just sharing what I heard from Tommy. She mentioned that you've been seen with attractive women having drinks or dinner before." I stood up and walked around, feeling confused. I thought we had an understanding. I never imagined she would get so upset and not talk to me about it. "Well, it's not exactly a secret. She gives me these worried looks, but when I ask her what's wrong, she just shakes her head. That's why I wanted to come over tonight. I sat back down and looked at them. What should I do? We talked for another hour. Their advice was straightforward. Talk to Tommy, explain everything, reassure her, and don't give up. It's easy to say, but hard to do. When I got home, I wrote her a long email explaining everything that happened at the bar and asked her to call me that night. But she didn't. When we spoke the next evening, she seemed distant and uninterested in my explanations or questions. On Saturday, when I picked her up at the airport, it was the same. Damon was friendly, but Tommy looked tired and upset. After dinner, I insisted we talk, and I shared my side of the story once more. "Why didn't you tell me this right away, Jack?" she asked, sounding more like a lawyer than my wife. "It didn't seem important at the time. I never thought you would hear about it and get upset. Even if someone we know had been there, it would have been clear it was just an innocent mistake. I wasn't with that woman for more than 45 seconds. She sighed and looked away. "Okay, Jack, let's drop it." "No, not if you don't trust me." "I would never cheat on you, Tommy." I knelt in front of her and took her hands. "Never." She gave a faint smile and squeezed my hands but looked weary and sad. "Okay, Jack, I believe you." She stood up. "I'm really tired from the trip. I think I'll go to bed now." Without looking back, she went to the bedroom. I stayed up for a long time that night, wondering how our situation had become so difficult so quickly. Things improved a little over the next few weeks. We weren't back to normal, but if Tommy was still worried, she kept it to herself better. She wasn't as relaxed or loving with me as before, but she was also less distant and suspicious. Somewhere in between, I guess. We were intimate when I asked, but her heart didn't seem to be in it most of the time. The situation changed from day to day. Some days I thought she had moved on and trusted me again. Other days she would come home from work feeling distant and cold. I never knew who I would see when she walked through the door. I was doing my best to communicate with her. I talked about everything, making sure she knew what I was up to while we were apart. I checked in often to avoid any misunderstandings. Then I had a trip to Chicago. Menestra sent me there to meet someone from a company interested in investing in us and expanding in the Great Lakes area. I had been in meetings like this before, but this one was with a charming woman named Karen who had long legs, blonde hair, and striking blue eyes. If I weren't happily married, I might have been curious about her. Instead, I simply thought, wow, she's attractive, and focused on the business at hand. We met one Wednesday afternoon at a conference room in a large office building downtown. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours, and it felt unusual. Karen didn't seem to understand all the details of the transaction as well as I expected. I held back my questions, wondering if she was in a position she wasn't quite ready for. The meeting ended without any clear decisions, but that was okay. Deals like this usually take multiple meetings, and this was just the first. Karen asked where I was staying and suggested dinner at the hotel restaurant. She was friendly but kept things professional. After our meal, I was already looking forward to heading upstairs to call Tommy. Suddenly, I felt extremely tired, struggling to keep my eyes open. I noticed Karen looking at me, but everything was a blur. I wanted to say, "Karen, I don't know what's happening," but then I think I just closed my eyes. When I woke up, sunlight poured in through the windows. Tommy was behind me, close and cozy. I smiled, enjoying her warmth. As I turned to kiss her, I was shocked to see Karen there. Her expression was bright and cheerful. "Oh, good. You're finally awake," she said with a grin. Confused, I jumped out of bed, backing away from her. "What are you doing here? How did you get into my room?" "Don't you remember?" she asked playfully. "You brought me here after dinner." I looked around the room, bewildered, trying to make sense of the situation. Her clothes and mine were all over the floor and chairs. Confused, I touched my body and noticed it felt dry, definitely not how I'd expect it to feel after a night together. "You need to go," I said. "Get dressed." "But Jack, we can—" I ignored her and picked up the phone on the desk. "This is Jack Hitchcock in room 721. I need a doctor here right away. Please bring a blood test kit. It's important." Turning to Karen, I said, "I mean it. You need to leave. I'm sure nothing happened between us last night, and I'm not interested in anything now." Ignoring her protests, I gathered her clothes and guided her into the bathroom to get dressed. Then I found my boxers and shirt and put them on. A minute later, Karen came out wearing her clothes and said, "Honestly, Jack, I don't know what you—" "Just stop, Karen, or whoever you are." I took her purse, handed it to her, walked her to the door, and gently pushed her out into the hallway, closing the door behind her. It didn't cross my mind that I should have checked her ID. 20 long minutes later, I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to find a doctor with gray hair holding a medical bag. "I'm Dr. Rogers. What's the emergency?" "I had dinner in the restaurant last night and I felt strange. I woke up in bed this morning and I believe I was drugged. I need a blood test." He tried to talk me out of it, but I was firm. And finally, Dr. Rogers took my blood and examined me for about 20 minutes. Afterward, he said, "Well, it's possible. Your story is unusual, but some of your vital signs are concerning. I wouldn't drive for a few hours. Have your doctor check you out in a couple of days. Give me your address, and I will arrange for the lab results to be sent to you in a few days." On the flight home, I thought deeply. As strange as it sounded, it was clear someone had set me up. It seemed to be an attempt to make Tommy think I was unfaithful. The incident at the bar likely led to this. My first guess would be Damon, but he had saved her when Don Harrington tried to harm her. Once back in Indianapolis, I called in and took the rest of the day off. Then I called Tommy and asked her to come home early. Her first question was, "Where were you last night? Why didn't you call me? Please, something strange happened. Can you come home now?" When Tommy arrived, I asked her to sit down and told her everything. She listened with disbelief and a hint of suspicion. "You're telling me that a client gave you something to drink, and when you woke up the next morning you found yourself in bed with her without your clothes on, but nothing happened." I spoke clearly and firmly, looking right into her eyes. "Tommy, I love you, more than anyone else. I have never cheated on you or been with another woman since we got married, and I never would. It might sound unbelievable, but I promise it's true. Please trust me. I'm not like those guys from your past." I paused, and we stared at each other for a long moment. Suddenly, her eyes filled with tears, and Tommy wrapped her arms around me and started to cry. "I'm sorry, Jack," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. "I believe you have just been hurt so many times." As she cried, I held her close, and after a while she started to feel a bit better. We talked about it, and we both agreed that someone must be trying to trick me. I had Minestra look into Karen, whoever she really is. They contacted the company in Chicago, and it turned out the whole meeting was a lie. They aren't interested in buying into Minestra, and there's no one named Karen working there. Is there anyone at Grand Valley you don't trust? Anyone who has acted overly friendly with you? She laughed and said, "Oh, about 20 guys. That's just how it goes for me, Jack. But I can't think of anyone who's been especially pushy. Let me think about it, and I'll ask Damon if he remembers anyone." We had a nice weekend, spending peaceful days together. Tommy seemed more assured, closer to me than before. We shared affectionate moments and talked a lot. With everything happening, including my drink being tampered with and the strange woman at the bar, she began to feel that someone was after me or us. On Tuesday, the lab report arrived in the mail, showing traces of Rohypnol and some other drugs. I showed it to Tommy as soon as she got home. She read it carefully, frowning. Then, to my relief, she laughed with me about it. "I'll talk to Damon about this tomorrow, Jack. Now that we know you were given something, maybe he can help investigate." But Wednesday night, things changed. Tommy came home looking worried and didn't want to talk to me. "What's wrong? Did you have a bad day?" I asked. "It's nothing, Jack," she answered, not making eye contact. "I just need some time alone." She skipped dinner and went to the bedroom to watch TV. I checked on her around 8 o'clock, but she wouldn't talk. When I went back at 9:30, she was already asleep. On Thursday, she left for work before I had finished in the shower. During the day, she emailed me to say she was working late and wouldn't be home until around 9 o'clock. When she walked in, she was quiet, just like the night before. After a little while, I went into the bedroom, took the TV remote from her, and turned off the TV. "Tommy, what's going on?" I asked. "Nothing, Jack. I'm just tired. I need to unwind. Can I please watch a bit of TV?" "No, honey, that's not okay. Some days it seems like we're close, and other days you act like you don't trust me. Did something happen?" She looked at me, and I could see she didn't want to talk. but I wasn't going to let it go. Listen, Jack, a lot of strange things have been happening. Honestly, it's hard to believe there's nothing to worry about. I stared at her. But Tommy, I've shared everything with you. I am not being unfaithful. I'm not doing anything wrong that would hurt our marriage. I'm trying to believe that, I really am. But it's hard, Jack. How about this? She said. It's been a long week. Let's get through tomorrow and then we can sit down over the weekend and talk everything through. Maybe we need some help, but we'll figure it out together. I quickly agreed. That sounds good. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I need you to trust me. Okay, she replied, picking up the remote and turning the TV back on. That meant our conversation was over. On Friday morning, nothing had changed. She was still distant, despite my attempts to connect with her. I left for work feeling worried and planned to make us a nice dinner that night, hoping for a calm evening together. But Tommy didn't come home Friday night. Actually, that's not quite right. She had been home earlier in the day. The bedroom closet was missing some clothes and the dresser drawers were all open. 2 suitcases were gone too. On the kitchen table I found her wedding ring and her engagement ring, which had belonged to my great-grandmother. There was also a note that said, I trusted you, I loved you, and I can't believe you would do this. I was shocked and confused. I called her cell, but it was off. I left a message. Tommy, I don't know what you think I've done, but I haven't cheated on you. I promise. Please call me so we can talk. I love you. I knew better than to call the police. It was too soon, and it seemed like Tommy had left on her own. I tried calling her workplace, but it was after 6 o'clock, and everyone at Grand Valley had gone home for the weekend. So I called Damon, hoping he might help. Hello? I recognized Elena's voice. Elena, hi, it's Jack Hitchcock, Tommy's husband. Oh, yes, Jack. How are you? I'm fine, thank you. Could I speak to Damon for a minute, please? Oh, I'm sorry, Jack. Damon is away on a trip. He left this afternoon and called to say he would be away for probably a couple of weeks. A couple of weeks? I stared at the phone, worried. Did he say where he was going? And is Tommy with him? I think he went to the West Coast, maybe Los Angeles at first. After that, I'm not sure where he's going. He didn't say anything about Tommy, but doesn't she usually travel with him? Yes, she does most of the time. Could you please ask Damon to call me as soon as you hear from him? Of course, Jack. I can give you his cell number too, if you want. I took down the number, thanked her, and tried calling Damon's cell. No answer. I left him a short message asking him to call me back. Then I called Katie and Eric. They hadn't seen Tommy in over a week and had no idea where she was. Katie could hear my worry in my voice. She asked what was wrong, and I explained the missing clothes, the rings, and the note. Jack, well, be right there, she said, then hung up. When they arrived, we sat in my living room and talked for an hour, but we didn't make much progress. What's strange, I said, is how her feelings kept changing. We would have good conversations, I would reassure her, and she'd seem better. But then a day or two later, she'd come home from work feeling upset and wouldn't talk to me at all. I have no idea what changed since last night when she wanted to talk this weekend. I was relieved that Katie and Eric believed me. Tommy had already shared the whole confusing story about how I was drugged, but they didn't seem to think I was involved in anything suspicious. In the end, we decided Katie would contact Alice in case she had heard from Tommy and let me know if there was any update. Once they left, I emailed David. Call me as soon as you can, urgent matter. The phone rang around 12:30 in the morning. I wasn't sleeping. What's up, Jack? Are you okay? David asked. I gave him the brief details and then the background, all the odd events from the last few months. It seems clear now that someone is trying to create problems for Tommy and me, I said. She'd start feeling better, then come home upset after work. I'm fairly certain it has to be someone at Grand Valley. Her boss? He asked. I considered that, but I don't think it's him. He's always been respectful and even helped her when someone tried to harm her. There was a pause, and I knew David was thinking. I don't have any great ideas right now, he said finally. Let me think about it. I do have some resources that could help locate Tommy. It may work or it may not. He'll give you a call if I hear anything, and you do the same, okay? Of course, David, thanks. And listen, you've got to stay calm. Don't get overwhelmed and don't do anything rash. Be careful and think things through, all right? We agreed to talk again in a couple of days and ended the call. I hardly slept that night. I got up several times to check my email, hoping to hear from Tommy or someone else. The next afternoon, after trying Tommy's and Damon's cell phones again and leaving 2 more messages, I forced myself to go to the supermarket. We were running low on food, and I knew I had to eat, even if I wasn't very hungry. While waiting at a red light, I looked over at the driver in the car next to me, and it was Don Harrington. He didn't see me, and he probably wouldn't have recognized me anyway since we'd only met a few times. Without thinking, I decided to follow him. I watched as he parked at a bar called Divine and went inside. What should I do now? Wait until he comes out and confront him? No, I told myself. I can't do that. David is right. I shouldn't do anything reckless. If I get in trouble, it will only complicate things. After sitting in the car for half an hour, I chose to go in and talk to him. I would stay calm and be firm. As I entered the bar, I let my eyes adjust to the low light. Eventually, I spotted Harrington sitting in a booth with another man, a younger guy in leather pants and a fitted shirt. I then realized I was in a place meant for a different crowd. Okay, I reminded myself, be polite and calm. I approached Harrington's booth and softly said, "Excuse me, you're Don Harrington, aren't you?" "Yes," he replied, looking up without recognizing me. I said, "I'm Jack Hitchcock Tommy's husband." He looked surprised and pulled back slightly, even though he was bigger than I was. His companion noticed and asked him, "What's wrong? Do you want me to get someone to help you with this guy?" I quickly said, "I just want to talk. I'm not here for trouble. Can we have a couple of minutes?" Harrington nodded, looking uncomfortable, and I sat down at the booth. "I know why you're here," he said right away, "and I truly apologize. It wasn't me. It was all a setup by Eberson. I'm not even," he indicated his friend and said, "I'm gay, and my partner is Adrian." I nodded. "Okay, can you tell me more about it?" Eberson took advantage of his staff at Grand Valley. Most were easily influenced, but I could tell from the start that Tommy was different. Eberson was fixated on her. I think he had seen her before, maybe at her last job, and he was determined to win her over. He pushed me to slip something into her drink to make her sleepy. That way, he could step in and make her think he was her savior. I didn't want to do it, but he didn't give me much choice. "But didn't that cost you your job? Your whole career at Grand Valley? Why would you agree to that?" He sighed. "I had a job offer in New York that Damon suggested I take. It was a great chance for my career. I was about to tell my team that I was leaving. Then he came up with this terrible idea. He said if I didn't do it, he would call the people in New York and say horrible things to ruin my chance. I knew Damon was capable of that, so I went along with him. He said he would humiliate me in front of everyone but promised me a $50,000 bonus. Since I was moving to New York anyway, I thought it wouldn't matter. I'm only here this weekend to see Adrian. He can't join me in New York for a few weeks because he is busy with a project." Throughout this, Adrian held Don's hand across the table, nodding sympathetically like he was the one who was suffering. You, I leaned back. "You realize you played a huge role in ruining my marriage. Tommy's gone, and I assume she's with Damon." I'm really sorry. It was a wrong thing to do. I was scared I would lose my job in New York." "And you couldn't have told her? Or me? Just reached out quietly and explained what was really going on?" He looked down at the table. "I know. You're right. I'm really sorry." There was nothing more to say. I stared at him for a moment, then got up and left. I rushed home and emailed David. It was her boss, Damon Eberson, who did all this so he could be with Tommy. The act of drugging by her coworker was a setup, made so Damon could step in and gain her trust. She's probably with him now. His wife doesn't know where he is. She told me he would be away for a couple of weeks heading west. She thought... He replied 2 hours later. "I'm on it. This new information helps. Stay calm and don't worry. I'll let you know if I find anything." Staying calm was harder than it sounded. I spoke to Katie and Eric daily, but they hadn't heard from Tommy, and Alice had no updates either. I had dinner with them on Sunday and Monday. Anything was better than being alone at home, filled with worry and anger. I kept trying to call Damon and Tommy, but they never answered. I also sent emails to Tommy. I had many thoughts about what I wanted to say to Damon. Most of them were filled with frustration. But I also cried when I thought of Tommy and what she might be going through, and how she would feel when she discovered it was all a trick. When I woke up on Tuesday morning, I found an email from my brother that he sent late at night. She's okay. She's in Fiji with Damon. I don't know much more. I'm trying to bring her back home. I'll keep you updated. This made me even more anxious, but I knew if David had more information, he would have told me. So I replied, "Thanks. Please let me know when you find out more." On Wednesday afternoon, I got another email from David while at work. I was just going through the motions, trying to keep busy instead of sitting at home worrying. I hadn't told anyone about my situation except Katie and Eric. She's okay. Coming back to Indianapolis later today, staying at the Conrad Hotel. Do not go there or call her. I'll call you tonight at 10 p.m. your time. I couldn't believe I wasn't supposed to call or see her. If anyone else had said that, I would have ignored it. But I trusted David, so I worried, chewed on a pencil, tried to work, and went home to make dinner. At 10 p.m. the phone rang. "Yes? Jack, it's me. She's okay. She's back in Indianapolis." Oh my God, thank goodness, David. How is she? What happened? "I can't talk long. I have to catch a flight. You'll get a DVD in your mailbox by 6 a.m. tomorrow. When you watch it, you'll know everything. Tommy will get one too. Wait until about noon to go see her. She's going to be very upset. Maybe take her friend Katie with you if you can." "Oh no. Is she hurt?" "No, she's not hurt, but it looks like she was with him. He got her drunk and filled her mind with lies." I didn't know how to respond. She was safe and back home, but I was angry that she was misled. "Are you okay, Jack? You need to hang in there." "Yeah, I'm okay. Mostly relieved and very angry. Thank you, David. I can't express how grateful I am. Just keep your cool and be patient with her, okay? I have to go. Call me after you watch the DVD. Could you have slept that night if you were in my shoes? No way." I wanted to call Katie, but I didn't know how to share what I had learned without involving David, so I decided to wait. I watched 4 old movies in a row, but I couldn't remember anything about them. At 5:30 a.m., I checked my mailbox for the 6th time and found a DVD in an envelope with no label. I took it and hurried back inside the house. I inserted the DVD into the player and leaned back. Suddenly, a room appeared on the screen. It looked like a small basement or storage area, with gray walls and no windows. In the middle of the room, against the far wall, Damon Eberson sat tied to a chair and appeared to be unconscious. The only other thing in the room was a rickety table with a small cage on it. Unexpectedly, a very tall man dressed in black and wearing a dark mask stepped into view. He walked over to Damon, carrying a bucket of water, and poured it over his head. Damon spluttered, shook his head, and seemed to wake up. He quickly tried to move, but realized he couldn't. "What is happening?" he asked, looking up at the man. "Glad you're awake, Damon," the masked man said in a deep, altered voice. "Now we can start." "What is going on?" Damon said, sounding annoyed. "Do you know who I am? One phone call and I can—" The tall man reached down and gave Damon a hard slap across the face, almost as if it were nothing. "Be quiet," he said. "I want you to see something." He brought the table closer to Damon and placed the cage directly in front of him. Inside the cage was a brown mouse. The tall man took a small vial from his pocket. With careful movements, he opened it, used an eyedropper to take some liquid, and dropped a single drop onto the skin of the mouse. The mouse didn't seem to react. "Watch now," he said. "It will happen in about 3 minutes." Damon looked worried but spoke up again. "Listen, I don't know what this is about, but I'm very successful. I'm sure we can—" "Do you want me to hit you again?" the tall man asked. "I can keep doing that if you want, or you can be quiet." Damon shook his head and fell silent. They waited in silence for at least another 2 minutes. Suddenly, the mouse let out a loud shriek, signaling it was in great distress. It fell over and shook, continuing to cry out in obvious pain. The awful sounds lasted nearly a minute before the mouse fell silent, panting and twitching. After 30 more seconds, it lay completely still. Damon's eyes widened, and he instinctively pushed his chair back against the wall, trying to distance himself from the table. He looked at the dead mouse, and then at the tall man. "Now we will talk," the tall man said. "You have seen what that liquid can do. For you, it would probably take a few drops on your skin, and it might take up to 5 minutes to work, but the result would be the same." Damon was pale and sweating, leaning back in the chair, trying to distance himself from the tall man. He shivered and said, "What do you want? I have money. I don't want your money," the tall man interrupted. He pulled over another chair and sat in front of Damon. "I know all about you and Tommy Parker. How you lied to her, how you had your friend Don Harrington drug her, and how you kept sending women to chase after her husband, all to get her to come to you. Now here are your choices. Choice 1. You smile at the camera and tell the whole story. Every detail. Leave nothing out, do you understand? I already know most of it, so it would be unwise to hold back, or we might need to go to choice 2. Choice 2 is what happened to the mouse. Damon's eyes unwillingly glanced at the mouse in its cage and then back to the tall man's serious face. He was trembling and breathing quickly. I'll tell you everything. Just promise you won't. There was a pause as Damon looked at the tall man, pleading. Tell the story. Damon took a deep breath. I wanted her. That's really all it was. She's one of the most beautiful women I've ever seen. Have you seen her? If you have, then you understand what I mean. I first saw her at Minestra Business Systems, where she used to work, and I knew I had to be with her. A month later, I was surprised to get her resume from an employment service that works for me. She was looking for a job. So, I set up an interview for her to be my personal assistant. When she came in, I could tell right away she was very loyal to her husband. So, I knew I needed to plan carefully. I could see that she had attracted attention before. How could she not, looking like that? So I took my time to figure out ways to earn her trust and to cause problems in her marriage. Damon spoke quickly and confidently now, seeming less afraid and focused on sharing his story completely. The assistant job meant Tommy would have to travel with me sometimes. She was worried about the situation, so I promised her it was all legitimate. I told her she could trust me, and her husband could even join us on the trips and share her room if he wanted. So, they went on those trips several times, and then I started planning some of my trips for when he couldn't come. How did you know when her husband was free? The man in the mask asked. I gave money to someone at Minestra. There was a guy named Daniel who worked for the vice president in charge of Jack's division. Jack is Tommy's husband. Daniel would tell me about Jack's work schedule, especially when he needed to travel or was busy with a big project. I also had my tech team look into Tommy's email account. I saw every message exchanged between her and Jack. This helped me plan my trips when Jack wouldn't be around. Damon paused for a moment and glanced at the still mouse, perhaps reminding himself what was at stake. Anyway, I knew I had to earn Tommy's trust, to make her see me as a good person. She was very suspicious. So, on one trip when one of my vice presidents was with us, I set it up for him to have dinner alone with Tommy at the hotel restaurant. I made her a bit dizzy by putting something in her drink. When she felt weak, he began to lead her toward the elevator, and I just happened to walk by, acting like I caught him in a bad situation, and I stopped him. She completely believed me. I yelled at Don, and he ran from the hotel. I took Tommy to the hospital. They checked her in, and I made sure to be there when she woke up. I explained what had happened. She was angry at Don, but extremely grateful to me. She said I was a great friend. What happened to the vice president? Oh, I made a big deal out of firing him when I got home, saying he wouldn't get a recommendation from me and embarrassing him in front of everyone. It was all a setup. He had a better job waiting for him in New York already as a senior vice president there, making a lot more money than I paid him. But no one back in Indianapolis knows about that. After that, Tommy saw me as a friend. She trusted me more and let her guard down. I had also been working on her husband Jack during this time. First, I got some questionable photos of him with a couple of women at different bars and restaurants while Tommy and I were away. In one bar, a woman was all over him, hugging and kissing him like they were close. Jack managed to pull away, but my photographer got some shots that looked pretty bad, like he was too cozy with her. I made sure Tommy saw those pictures. I went to talk to her, feeling worried. I mentioned that I heard some rumors about her husband possibly being unfaithful, so I arranged for someone to follow him and my photographer got some photos. I then set up a situation to catch him with another woman. How did you do that? It was quite tricky, actually. Damon started to smile for a moment, but then remembered how serious everything was. Through Daniel from Minestra, I set up a fake meeting in Chicago with a potential client and arranged for Jack to attend as the company representative. When Jack got to Chicago, the client he met was someone I had hired to play along. She pretended to have a business meeting with him and then suggested they go out for dinner. During dinner, she had to add something to Jack's coffee since he wasn't drinking alcohol. He became a little dizzy, and she took him upstairs to his room. She was supposed to make it look like they had spent the night together. When Jack woke up the next morning, she acted all sweet and said, "You were amazing last night. Let's continue this morning." She was going to go along with it then. Did Jack go for it? Damon frowned. No, he didn't. Instead, he got very upset, threw her out of the hotel room, and called the hotel doctor. When the doctor arrived, Jack asked for a drug test. Then he flew home and told Tommy the whole strange story. 4 days later, when the test results came back, he could show her that he had been given some kind of strong sedative that put him to sleep. My plan might have failed because I didn't get any evidence to use, but I knew what was happening because I could see all her emails. So whenever Jack reassured Tommy, I would talk to her and suggest a different version that made Jack seem untrustworthy. In this case, I waited for her to share everything. How Jack had woken up with a woman, claiming he had been drugged, and how he had a test to prove it. I frowned and pretended to think hard, then said, "Something about this doesn't add up. Tommy, let me see what I can find out." Then, 2 days later, I spoke to her, sounding hesitant and sad. I told her that I had hired a private investigation firm in Chicago to look into things. They discovered the doctor was an old college buddy of Jack's, and the lab that supposedly did the drug testing wasn't real. I claimed it must have all been a setup, with Jack's friend helping him create a complicated story to make Tommy believe he hadn't cheated. Even then, she didn't fully believe me. I handed her the private investigator's report. It looked official, with professional letterhead and detailed notes about what had happened, including interviews with witnesses and hotel staff. That was the turning point. She broke down in tears, cursing her husband. I comforted her, assuring her she deserved better and shouldn't let him explain away his mistakes. She needed to let him go completely. I suggested she take some time away to clear her head, so I took her to Fiji. My wife and I have a secluded house on the beach there. I told her this break might help her decide her next steps. For the first few days, I simply listened to her. We walked along the beach and she shared her pain and anger. She swore she'd never trust another man again. I stayed by her side as a supportive friend, the one person she could rely on. After a few days, I could tell she was starting to relax a bit, though she was still upset. Each evening, I made sure we had a good dinner and some wine to ease her mind. For the first few nights, I listened patiently, guiding her back to her room afterward. On the fourth night, I encouraged her to let go of her anger and take back control of her life. We talked about her need for closure, and as the night went on, she started to feel more empowered. When we finally headed back to the house, she seemed ready to face her future. The next morning, though, she was emotional again. She said that even though her marriage was over, she was still conflicted about moving forward. I gave her space, hoping she'd find clarity with a bit of time. That afternoon, I took a break, and later on, I found myself here, bound to this chair, and that's really all there is to it. If there's anything else you need, just ask. The tall man, silent and masked, observed Damon for a long moment. "Have you done this before?" Damon swallowed, looking nervous. "Well, nothing like this exactly," he muttered, hesitating. "That was mostly why I hired them. But never anything as messy as this. I didn't mess with anyone's marriage before. Just some charm and nice vacations, and that was all I needed with the others. Are you even sorry for what you did? Breaking up Tommy and Jack's marriage, putting them through pain just because you wanted her?" Damon looked truly surprised, as if he'd never thought about it before. After a moment, he cleared his throat. Yes. Yes, I realize now it was a terrible thing to do. Really awful." He looked up, hoping for a response, but the tall man stayed silent. Damon fidgeted, then added, I know I have to make it up to her somehow. And I will. Sure. As soon as I get out of here, I'll tell her the whole truth and ask for her forgiveness. And I'll help them financially, give them a lot, maybe millions, so they never have to worry about money. That'll be quiet, the tall man said. He left briefly and returned with a laptop. I'm logging into your email to send a message, he said. After typing for a moment, he looked up. What's your password? Damon hesitated briefly, then replied, Studman22. The tall man typed it in, entered some text, pressed a few more keys, and closed the laptop. He stood up, looking down at Damon. Then he said, I was never here. You've never been here. You don't know this place. Got it, sure I understand, Damon said, nodding quickly. And you'll never contact Tommy or Jack again, nor anyone connected to them. Yes, of course, definitely. If, and only if, Tommy contacts you, you will respond. You'll give her whatever she needs, the truth, financial help, a recommendation for a job, anything. If she asks for 2 custom cars, they'll be in her driveway. Clear? Absolutely. Damon nodded, trying to show he understood. The tall man looked at him for a moment, then took out a vial, filled a dropper, and walked over to Damon. I've decided. It's going to be choice 2. Damon started to struggle. Wait, no, I did everything you... It doesn't matter, Damon. You behaved badly. Completely unacceptable. You deserve this, the tall man said quietly. No, please. He'll do anything. I can pay you. Damon's voice grew high and desperate as he tried to pull free from the chair. The tall man didn't respond. He calmly squeezed the dropper, letting a few drops fall onto Damon's chest. Damon flinched and twisted, trying to avoid the liquid panic clear in his eyes. Please, no, Damon shouted, twisting and shaking his body as if he could get rid of the drops on his skin. Without looking back, the tall man closed the vial and returned it to his pocket. He then picked up the small cage and the laptop, walked toward the camera, and reached for it. The screen went black. I sat there in silence, staring at the dark screen, absorbing what I'd just seen. Damon's words had helped piece together so much of what had been confusing, especially how Tommy would seem fine one moment, only to come home later, upset and distant. It was almost 7 a.m. when I picked up the phone to call David. Hello? David sounded half asleep. Sorry to wake you. I just watched it, I said. I'm awake. It's okay, he replied, stifling a yawn. David, is he okay? And was that you? David gave a small laugh. No and no, I'm on the other side of the world. A friend of mine who was nearby handled it. And no, he didn't actually hurt Eberson. From what I gather, he simply gave him a scare, some water instead of anything harmful. Just enough to make him feel real fear for a few minutes. I took a deep breath. How did you even find him? And get him into that situation? That's something I can't share, little brother. But no offense intended. None taken. Can you at least tell me how Tommy got back and where she is now? My friend sent her an email from Eberson's account. It said something like, I had to leave for an emergency. Book yourself a first-class flight back and check into Grand Valley's suite at the Conrad Hotel. I'll be in touch soon. She's scheduled to get a delivery, a DVD, around 9 o'clock this morning. That's why I suggest you wait until noon to go see her. Bring Katie along if you can. All right, I replied, my mind racing. David, how can I ever repay you for this? Forget it. Just take care of Tommy. None of this was her fault. I'll see you in a few weeks. After we hung up, I called the Conrad Hotel. Good morning. Could you please tell me if Miss Tommy Hitchcock has checked into the Grand Valley suite? Just a moment. Yes, she has. Shall I connect you? No, thanks. It's a bit early. I'll call again later, thank you. Thank goodness. I sat for a few minutes, then called Katie. Katie, it's Jack. Tommy's back and staying at the Conrad. I haven't talked to her yet, but I plan to go over around noon. Can you come with me? Katie started to cry. Oh my gosh, Jack, I'm so relieved. Hold on a minute. I could hear her sniffing. Sorry, I just got so emotional. I've been so worried. Do you want to go over right now? No, it's a little complicated. I think waiting until noon is better. Okay, do you want to pick me up at work at 11:30? How do you know she's there if you haven't talked to her? I got an email. Then I called the hotel to confirm she checked in. It's a long story I'll explain later. After hanging up, I found myself in tears. Was it from relief, despair, exhaustion? It didn't really matter. I made some coffee, took a long hot shower, and tried to eat some eggs and toast. My mind raced at full speed, and I couldn't quiet it down. When I picked up Katie, she had many questions, all coming at once. I had thought about what to share and what to hold back. Hang on, Katie. He'll tell you what I know. I took a breath. Tommy's boss, Damon Eberson, is behind everything that's been happening. He wanted to get close to her, and he convinced her that I had been unfaithful. Last Friday, he took her away to Fiji with him. He has a place there. And, are you sure anything happened? She asked, concerned. It seems likely, but someone I'm not sure who intervened and brought her back. By now, she's probably seen the DVD that was sent to me, which explains everything Damon was doing. Katie looked at me in shock, her mouth slightly open. Oh my, Jack, I can't believe this. Yeah, it's been a tough week, a tough 6 months to be honest, but at least she's back now. Was it hard to see her? Oh no, nothing like that. The DVD shows Damon admitting what he did, how he manipulated her for a long time, and the lies he told to frame me with other women. My goodness. She paused for a moment. I can't imagine what Tommy is feeling right now, or you either, Jack. How are you holding it together? I chuckled lightly. I'm not sure I am, but I think it makes sense for you to go and see Tommy first. I don't know how Shell'll react, whether Shell'll be angry, upset, or... I don't know. She might be mad at me for letting this happen. We walked into the Conrad. Katie went straight to the front desk and asked them to call the Grand Valley Suite. She spoke for a moment on the phone, then came back to me. She sounded terrible, Jack, but she wants you to come up. Thanks, Katie. I'll wait down here until you think she's ready. Just call my phone. The 30 minutes felt long. I was tired, upset, worried about Tommy, and full of regrets. If only we had noticed what was going on. If only Tommy had shared her doubts with me. Finally, my phone rang. Jack, come on up. Suite 1501. Is she okay? I asked, feeling anxious, but Katie just said, just come up, okay? When I knocked on the door, Katie let me in. Tommy sat on a couch across the room with a blank look on her face. She looked completely worn out, my beautiful wife, but lacking her usual spark. Tommy, are you okay? I walked toward her slowly, as if I was afraid she'd pull away. I'm okay, Jack, she said softly. I'm angry, sad, ashamed, scared. I don't really know what I am right now. I reached her, took her hands gently, and pulled her to her feet. I wrapped my arms around her. She hugged me back without much feeling as I held her close. Thank goodness you're here, I whispered, but she stepped back and looked at me with uncertainty. Do you really mean that? You still want to be with me after? She paused and looked away. After everything? I kissed her forehead. You didn't do anything. It was what happened. It's over now. Don't say that, Jack. She pulled away and walked to the other side of the room. Don't say I didn't do anything. You don't... Her voice trailed off. I glanced at Katie, who was watching us sadly. How about we get Tommy's things and leave? I suggested. Katie nodded. Tommy, come on, I'll help you pack. She took Tommy's hand and led her into the bedroom. I sank onto the couch, unsure of what I expected from our reunion, but this was definitely not it. Afterwards, we dropped Katie back at work. She promised to check in with us later. On the way home, the car was mostly quiet. Tommy stared out the window, and I got short answers when I tried to talk. I carried the suitcases to the door and unlocked it for Tommy. As we stepped inside, I asked, Have you eaten? How about I make us some lunch so we can talk? Lunch sounds good, thanks, she said, sitting tiredly at the kitchen table. I haven't slept much in the last day and a half. Jack, can I just sit here for a bit? I smiled and kissed her cheek. Of course, I'd be happy to wait on you. I quickly made some sandwiches and we ate in silence. I smiled at Tommy, but she didn't seem very happy to see me. Once we were done, I took her hand and led us to the living room, where we sat on the couch. I wanted to put my arm around her, but I kept some distance between us. I'm really glad you're back, I said. I think we have a lot to talk about. She looked at me with no expression. Then, to my surprise, she stood up and said, I know, Jack, but I'm not ready for that yet. I'm going to lie down for a bit, okay? Without waiting for an answer, she walked toward the bedroom. No, that's not okay. I stood up and faced her, feeling tears fill my eyes. She turned around, looking surprised. I know you're tired, Tommy. You've been through so much, I said. I was crying now. But it's been hard for me too, with you just disappearing like that and leaving that note. And now that you're back, I want so much to reconnect with you and to start moving past everything. You choose to push me away because you're not ready. Well, fine, I cried. Just let me know when you are ready. I pulled the car keys from my pocket and headed for the front door, tears streaming down my face. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to leave. No! Jack, wait! I heard her call after me as I hurried down the path to my car, but I didn't stop. I could hear her footsteps getting closer. Please, Jack! As I opened the car door, she grabbed me from behind, holding on tightly. No, please don't go! I'm sorry, you're right! I'm sorry! She was crying, too. I turned around and she clung to me, sobbing, I'm so sorry! I let her pull me back toward the house, gripping my arm tightly while still apologizing. It's just been so awful. I felt ashamed and angry, scared of what you'd say, if you'd even talk to me. I interrupted her, saying, Shh, I'm not angry. You mean you're not going to send me away? I looked at her, surprised. No, of course not. I love you, Tommy. This wasn't your fault. She gazed into my eyes as if she couldn't believe me. Then she said quietly, You don't know what I did, Jack. I let him take advantage of me. He tricked me and got me drunk, and I let him. I already know, I said softly. It's not your fault. I saw the video too. Her eyes widened, and she began to cry again. I'm so sorry, Jack. I picked her up and carried her into the bedroom, lying down next to her on the bed and wrapping my arms around her, hoping she would relax and we could both feel better soon. But Tommy just kept crying, unable to be comforted. Then she suddenly looked at me and kissed me deeply. Please be with me, Jack. She hurriedly took off my clothes, and soon we were both without them. She pulled me close, wanting to be with me, whispering, Please love me, baby, repeatedly. It felt more urgent than enjoyable, but it was what she wanted. As I got closer, I tried to hold back, but she urged me on, saying, No, I need you. And moments later, I felt a rush, and she held me tightly, saying, Yes, thank you. Afterward, we lay quietly together, sharing gentle kisses and fell asleep in each other's arms. I thought, thank goodness, as I drifted off. When I woke up, I looked for Tommy, but she wasn't in bed. I listened carefully and caught the sound of her footsteps coming back. She entered the room with a smile and a tray. She had put on my clothes, a little something to boost your energy. She set the tray down and sat in front of me. She had made grilled cheese sandwiches and bowls of tomato soup. Comfort food, my mom used to call it. This is what she made for me and Alice when we were feeling down. I think the last week counts, right? I leaned over and kissed her. Yeah, but it's over now. You're back and I'm here with you. It's a new start. After we ate, we moved the tray and lay down again. Tommy snuggled in my arm and we began to talk softly about what had happened. I didn't learn much that I didn't already know, but Tommy explained how Damon slowly made her doubt my trustworthiness. He was a great actor, Jack. He would listen to me and then nod, saying, That sounds reasonable, I guess. But then he'd have this worried look, and when I asked about it, he would say, No, it's nothing. I don't want to cause you concern. That just made me ask more, and he would mention that Daniel Hatman at Minestra knew you and said you were quite the charmer, or that your story about that woman kissing you in the bar seemed a bit too perfect. Comments like that always made me anxious and erased all the good things you had told me. Once I found out he had been reading my emails, it all became clear he always made time to get ready for what was going to happen. I told Tommy everything I had done since she went missing. I called Katie and Eric, reached out to David for help, and confronted Don Harrington to find out the truth. After that, I understood who was behind all this. I called David and he figured out the rest. It was some associate of his who took Damon and made that recording. Tommy nodded. When I thought about it, I realized it had to involve David. He doesn't work for IBM, does he? I'm fairly certain he doesn't, but he's never shared who he actually works for, and I've never asked. We owe him a great deal. We sat quietly for a moment. Then I asked, "Can I ask you something? About coming back to Indianapolis and how it felt to watch the DVD?" Tommy propped herself up with a pillow against the headboard. She looked away from me, gazing out the window. I arrived at the Conrad and went straight to bed. I was worn out from the flight and emotionally drained. Your betrayal, spending those few days with Damon, I felt hollow. I had no idea what to do next. In the morning, there was a knock on the door. When I looked through the peephole, no one was there. I opened it carefully, with the chain on, and found an envelope labeled Tommy. Inside was the DVD and a note saying, "Watch this if you want to know the truth." It nearly broke me, Jack. I had to pause and cry several times before I could get through it all. Her voice turned serious. That awful person, how could he? She looked at me. He's gone now, right? I shook my head. David says no, the guy just scared him a little, making him suffer for a few minutes. We need to figure out what to do about him. I have some ideas, she said, looking away from me again. Most of them involve some pain for him. When I thought about what he did to me, to us, when I realized he did all that just to hurt me and that I let him, I thought about jumping out the window. I really considered it. I couldn't imagine you would ever want me back after everything, and I didn't see a reason to keep living. She turned to face me, giving a small smile. I might have done it, you know. I sat there for a long time, thinking, there's no rush. I can take the day slowly, order some food, and maybe I'll do it tonight. Jumping in the dark would feel easier, less frightening. She shuddered. Thank goodness you and Katie came by, and thank goodness you sent her up first, Jack. I could not have faced you. I mean it. It took a lot for her to convince me to let you come up. I was never upset with you, Tommy. I wrapped my arms around her gently and kissed her forehead. I was scared and worried, she said. When I saw the DVD, I was angry at that guy, but mostly I felt sad. Sad for everything he made you go through, especially you. I was afraid of how much pain you were in. She looked straight into my eyes. I don't understand. Why aren't you angry with me? Why don't you shout at me for believing a liar like Damon instead of trusting you? Because you were tricked, I replied. So was I. We both believed his friendly act. We were cautious, but not cautious enough. Listen, Tommy, there is nothing I hold against you. My tone was serious, and you shouldn't blame yourself either. I stood up and took her hand. Come with me, all right? I led her into the bathroom, and she walked behind me, looking curious. I turned on the warm water in our shower, then gently helped her remove her shirt and shorts. We stepped under the soft spray. I held her comfortingly as the warm water relaxed us. Then I got the soap and started to wash her gently. I took my time, cleaning her fingers and hands, her arms and shoulders, and her back. I knelt down to wash her feet and legs, while Tommy rested her hands on my back for support. Then I carefully washed other areas, ensuring I was gentle and thorough. Through it all, Tommy remained quiet, her eyes closed, letting me guide her. When I finished washing her body, I got the shampoo and cleaned her hair, giving her a gentle scalp massage. Lastly, I washed her face softly with my fingers, brushing over her lips, nose, and eyelids. When I was done, I held her in my arms again, her head resting on my shoulder. He's gone now, I said. He's completely out of your life like he was never here. You're clean again. She looked up at me and kissed me. Then she started to cry. I held her under the water as she let it out, soothing her until she calmed down. After a moment, she stepped back with a smile. Now I'm going to wash you too, but quicker, before the hot water runs out. Then I want to sleep in your arms for a while. When we wake up, all of this will just be a memory. So she washed me, we dried off, and I turned off the phone ringer. We fell asleep. We were sitting on the back deck with Katie and Eric. They had brought over some sandwiches, and I had gotten us all some drinks. I'm so glad you called, Katie said. When you didn't answer the phone last night, I thought you might just want some time alone, she said with a smile. But I'm really glad you're back, she added. Eric said something similar, and we all expressed our thanks. Tommy said, "We really wanted to see you and just enjoy a regular day together. You probably have a lot of questions, but Jack and I want to set all that aside for now." Eric and Katie nodded, saying they understood. Then there was a little pause before Tommy asked, "So, what have you all been up to lately?" We all burst into laughter. After a while, we clinked our beer bottles together in a silent toast, sharing smiles and drifting into a pleasant conversation about various topics. On Monday, I returned to work. Tommy would not go back to Grand Valley. We decided to take our time before figuring out what to do about Damon. Tommy sent him an email that read, "Please pack up my things and send them to me. Do not contact me. I'll reach out when I'm ready." With a hint of a smile, she said to me, "That should keep him on edge." Then, in a serious tone, she said, "I'm really sorry, Jack. I should have trusted you." I held her close, and we sat in silence, not needing to say more. For the first few weeks, she stayed at home, enjoying the peace and settling back into our daily lives. She prepared lovely dinners for us each night, and we spent our evenings talking or watching TV, just happy to be together. We both felt we should see a counselor to work through everything and move forward. Tommy suggested, "I think it should be a woman." At the same moment, I said, "It has to be a woman." We exchanged surprised looks before laughing. "You go first," I said, still chuckling. "Why do you think that?" "I feel like I could trust a woman to understand what I go through being approached all the time and having trouble trusting men. What about you?" "I think for a similar reason," I replied. "Any male counselor might find you attractive, which could distract them from helping us. I want someone focused on assisting you and me, not distracted by anything else." I spoke to Irene in Human Resources at Minestra to get a couple of recommendations. On Thursday, Tommy and I met with Dr. Diane McInerney. She was a tall, friendly woman whose warm smile made us both feel at ease, and we agreed on the way home that we would keep seeing her. After about 3 weeks, Tommy began to feel restless and decided to look for a new job. She sent Damon another email. "I'm looking for new job opportunities. If anyone reaches out to Grand Valley for a reference, ensure it is very positive. No need for anything overly enthusiastic, just something solid and nice. Do not respond to this message." That weekend, David came to visit. It was relaxed, but really nice. We both had a lot to thank him for, and he was glad to see how well Tommy was doing and how well we were doing together. Whenever either of us tried to express our thanks, he just waved it off, slightly ducking his head and mumbling that he was just happy to help. We shared our plans for dealing with Damon, and he smiled at some of them. He had a few good suggestions of his own, too. After a few weeks, Tommy said to me, "I think I'm ready, let's do it this weekend." By then, she had started a new job as an executive secretary for a woman vice president at a small software company, and it seemed to be going well. We had talked a lot about what we wanted to achieve in our final meeting with Damon. On Tuesday, Tommy emailed him, "Come to our house on Saturday night at 8 p.m. and bring Elena. Both of you need to be on time. No need to reply to this message." When they rang the bell right at 8 p.m. on Saturday, I welcomed Damon and his wife Elena into the living room. Damon looked a bit pale and anxious, while Elena seemed slightly annoyed. I led them to a sofa where they sat, and Tommy walked in. Nobody offered to shake hands. "What is this about?" Elena asked a bit sharply. "Damon and I were supposed to go to Atlanta for our niece's first communion this weekend. Then, at the last minute, he insisted we had to be here." "I'm sorry for the trouble, Elena. Did Damon tell you what to expect tonight?" She looked even more irritated. "No, he wouldn't say anything until we were on the way here. Then he just warned me that you two might pull some ridiculous story about him cheating on me or going after Tommy." She glared at both of us. "I hope you aren't going to waste my time with nonsense like that." "I'm really sorry, Elena, but it is true. Please come with me to the study," Tommy said. "I have something important for you to see." Damon jumped up in alarm, but I motioned for him to sit back down. As the ladies left the room, I said, "It's just a video recording, Damon. It's nothing you need to see. You're the main person in it. Come on, you can't. Tommy knows how to reach out again if we need to, Damon. Do you really think we would lose track of you?" He glared at me, but eventually looked away in frustration and sat back down. Tommy came back. "She's watching it now. I don't want to see it again." We sat in silence for almost 30 minutes, only interrupted by a few shouts of anger from Elena in the other room. When she stormed back into the living room, she was really angry. She went straight to Damon and started hitting him on the face while he backed away from her. "You jerk! You terrible person! I can't believe I ever loved you or trusted you." Still mad, she turned to me and Tommy. "I hope you make him pay for this. I hope you ruin him. That liar." "I'm sorry, Elena," Damon said quietly, looking down at the floor. She didn't pay attention to him. "Elena, I called a cab to take you home," I said. "I thought you might not want to stay here while we figure things out with your husband." "You mean my soon-to-be ex-husband?" Then she softened a little. "Tommy, I'm really sorry about what Damon has done. I didn't know. I had no idea." She walked over to Tommy and they hugged briefly. Then she turned back to me. "Jack, I'm sorry to you too, and I think I'll take that cab if that's okay. Elena, I have a copy of what you just saw, in case you want to keep it." I handed her the DVD and led her outside to the waiting taxi. I returned to the quiet living room. Damon didn't look up. "Okay, you know what you did," Tommy said quietly. "It's time to face the music." Damon finally looked at us. He seemed old and very tired. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that doesn't—" "Enough!" Tommy was shaking with anger. "Do you really think I want to hear anything from you right now?" I moved behind her to massage her shoulders, hoping to calm her down. She was breathing fast. I thought she might do something drastic. "Damon," I said, "we're going to tell you exactly what you need to do. You need to follow our instructions exactly for 2 important reasons. Do you want to hear them?" "The first is Darth Vader, of course. The second is the recording you just saw. How do you think that might affect your standing in business or at your golf club?" He looked down, speechless. Tommy went to the table and picked up a pen and a yellow legal pad. "First," she said, "you will give me the names of all the Grand Valley employees you've had any inappropriate contact with." Damon looked alarmed as she handed him the pad and pen. "But just write it down. And make sure you don't leave anyone out." Reluctantly, he wrote down a list of 7 names. "I'm going to speak with each of these women," Tommy said as she took the pad back. "After that, you will write them compensation checks in whatever amounts I decide are fair." Damon remained silent. "Next, you will start a nationwide search for a new vice president in Grand Valley's Human Resources Office. This person will create and implement a policy to prevent harassment in the workplace. You will do this within the next 2 months. Next, you need to send a check for $2 million to Jack and me from your own account by Monday. It will likely be more than $2 million because it needs to cover the taxes on that gift. Your accountant can help you figure it out." "Look at me, Damon. Look at me," Tommy shouted. Startled, Damon looked up at her, shifting back slightly into the couch. "There's one last thing on my list, you know. After you finish this, you will leave and not come near us again. You will only do what we told you to do, and there will be no further contact. Is that clear?" Damon nodded while looking down. Yes, I understand." "Okay then, here's the last thing." We walked together, hand in hand, feeling the cool water touch our feet as it washed up on the shore. I stopped and pulled Tommy close, and we shared a kiss. I felt her warmth against me and bent down to kiss her belly, making her giggle. "That reminds me. Tap, you promised to tell me the moment Susie calls to say she feels the baby kick, don't forget." Susie Bastian was back in Indianapolis. She was the woman who was helping us with our baby, my sperm and Tommy's egg. The process of in vitro fertilization and the placement of the fertilized egg is complex and expensive. That is what the money from Damon is for. It will also support Susie during her pregnancy. Once we finish growing our family, we plan to donate any remaining funds to an infertility clinic to help others who need assistance. Tommy laughed. "When he kicks, I will." "How can you be so sure it's a boy?" I asked. "Women's intuition, of course. Want to make a bet on it?" "Sure," I said. "What are the terms?" "If I'm right, we name him after your brother David, and you must stay with me for the rest of our lives." "You drive a hard bargain, but okay. What if I win?" She said, smiling. "That's a tough one since it seems so unlikely. You can choose the reward. All right, if we have at least one more. I want it to be a sister or brother for her, and you have to stay with me for the rest of our lives." That's an easy deal. I knew you'd want me to stay with you. You already are, I smiled. You understand me, and you give me everything I want. You're perfect. Tommy paused, looked at me, and kissed me softly. Thank you, Jack, she said. And now, my love, read my mind. She said, putting her arm around my waist. Well, you probably want to walk a bit longer since we just had a big lunch. We enjoyed the warm sun, taking a quick dip to cool off, then lying back to soak in the rays. After a while, I suggested we head inside for a bit of rest and relaxation. I like the way you think, she said with a smile. She must have been reading my mind because that was exactly how I'd imagined our afternoon together. Sometime later, I was sitting on the bed, watching her as the bright Tahitian sun filled the room. She moved gracefully, her movements calm and relaxed, as she caught me looking at her. You are incredible, I told her. Oh, I bet you say that to everyone, she replied, laughing softly. Only to you, I said, taking her in my arms and holding her close. She lay down on the bed, and I offered to help her relax. She gave me a playful smile and closed her eyes, agreeing without a word. I took some lotion and gently massaged her back, focusing on her shoulders and arms. She let out a small, contented sigh as I moved down to her hands, spending time on each finger, easing away any tension. I continued down to her feet, working carefully, making sure each area was relaxed. After a while, she turned over, her eyes bright, clearly enjoying the calm and closeness we were sharing. We lay together, holding each other, exchanging gentle kisses, feeling completely at ease. It was peaceful, both of us simply appreciating each other's presence. We stayed like that for a while, completely relaxed and content, letting the quiet moments bring us closer. She smiled a little and said, You tricky person, you made me feel weak, and now you want to take advantage of me, don't you? Well, since you mentioned it, I replied, enjoying the connection we shared. How could you do this, oh my, please? She exclaimed as each moment passed, until she stopped holding back and moved closer, wrapping her legs around me. We embraced and held on to each other. It might not have lasted long, but it felt joyful and endless. We kissed passionately until we needed to pause for a breath, and then we continued to hold each other until I felt a wave of happiness. Afterward, I sighed contentedly and rolled to the side, noticing the marks she had left on my back. You've marked me, Tap, I said, turning so she could see the result. Gently kissing the marks and touching them with her hand, she said, You'll be fine. Besides, I can't help it. You were making me excited. She turned to face me and said, You're the best, you know that? The best partner, just the best. Thank you, dear. I felt really touched by her words. This was the clearest expression of her feelings I had ever heard. And you are everything I've ever wanted. I feel very lucky. We shared a few more kisses before drifting off to sleep. 3 hours later, we were finishing our dinner: grilled fish, a salad, and a lovely Australian wine while watching the sun lower towards the horizon. Do you think we're finished, dear? With Diane, I mean? I took her hand and said, I think so, if you think so. She's been helpful, but our last few sessions felt repetitive. Maybe it's time to move on after 11 months. I agree. I was thinking we might have 1 or 2 more meetings when we get back, just to wrap things up. Maybe discuss becoming parents a bit. I know I feel a bit nervous about that. You will be a wonderful mom. I leaned over and kissed her nose. I will be the husband of a wonderful mom. We sat a bit longer, enjoying the breeze. Suddenly it seemed like half of the orange sun had vanished, sinking below the horizon. When you first suggested that Damon give us his house in Fiji, I was confused. I thought, why would Tap want to go there, considering the bad memories? But it turned out to be a great idea. I could see it in his face. It was hard for him to lose that house. Tommy smiled at me. I felt good about that too. You're right. I wouldn't have wanted to go back there. But I knew we could sell it easily. It's incredibly fancy, very private, and in a great spot. And we could use the money to get something amazing, like this place in Tahiti, or really anywhere we wanted. I knew it would bother him more to lose that house than just to give us the money. An extra $3 million wouldn't have meant much to him. You were right, as always. I stood up and we walked to the edge of the deck, looking at the fading light in the western sky. I put my arm around Tommy, and she rested her head on my shoulder. You know what? The luckiest day of my life wasn't when you started working at Minestra, it was when I heard you talking to Katie at the Acropolis Diner. Because otherwise, I never would have understood what your life has been like, all the challenges you faced. I would have been like every other guy, dazzled by how much I wanted you, but totally blind to how smart, caring, funny, and so many other great things you are. I agree with you, Jack. I could tell she was about to make a joke. That was indeed the luckiest day of your life. She looked at me and laughed, a light-hearted laugh that was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. And she kept laughing until I leaned in to kiss her. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of the exciting stories we have coming up. What do you think about the characters in this story? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.